Hello and welcome to Watch from Home Theater. This is our brand new show where we here on Cinefix and IGN, we can still watch movies together, which is super exciting, even though we're all stuck at home. I'm Clint Gage, and joining me in this cozy little live stream are IGN's Terry Schwartz and Brian Altano. Guys, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. Excited to be here.
Yes. Today we're going to be watching The Invisible Man and talking about it while we watch. And joining us to do that, the most important person here, no offense to you guys, is Leigh Whannell, writer and director of The Invisible Man. Leigh, thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm in my home office. I hope you don't mind a friend joining us.
God.
We didn't know that we were bringing guests, but might as well bring the short.
That was a very, very terrifying and on-brand pan.
Yes.
That you did.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Are you going to pan back shortly, and he's going to be?
How close am I allowed to get to it so we can show?
Get close. Let's see it.
Get up in there.
I want everybody at home to see the detail on the eye.
Oh wow!
Is there like sweat in the side of his head? He's like,
there's sweat.
Oh my god!
This I do have a couch bed in my office, and occasionally people will stay in here, and
that statue makes it very difficult for them to get in. But it is kind of weird this is where I wrote The Invisible Man.
Oh, nice.
In this room. So yeah, you can see there's my little toy collection behind us.
I love it.
What's your favorite toy back there? What do you got back there?
Well, I mean, if the Arnie doesn't count, I'm gonna.
No, the Arnie is something else entirely. That's just
I do
6 feet worth of fear standing in your corner.
The Jack Torrance.
Oh, he's awesome.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I do love the little likeness. Hard to find this one. Hard to find. I think it was made in Japan, but that's a good one.
That's a good Jack Nicholson,
I know, very good. A lot of times
face,
you look at the likeness and you're like, sorry, no. There's a Jack Burton here that I like.
Oh, he's great.
There you go.
I think that's the Hot Toys.
Yeah, there's
awesome.
a couple
is that a Lebowski back there?
There is a Lebowski. There's a Skeletor. This is the Thor shelf.
Oh,
that's
so
awesome.
Yeah.
Got to do.
How many of these are official, and how many of these are fan creations?
This one I found in a toy store in Turkey. Believe it or not. I don't think this is official.
Can we get Funko Pops? Funko Pops, just bobbling with the head.
That is horrifying. I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot. I could probably take up 2 hours just sort of talking through it.
I also my favorite thing about having the Terminator hovering in the background as you wrote The Invisible Man is he is your your predatory presence.
Yeah, it's he's good. He keeps me company. I just love that. I love that film. I love the original Terminator, and I had to get the original. I didn't want the Terminator 2 version to be the original, with the jacket and sort of that little that hairdo that he has in the first one. So anyway, sorry, I'm taking, and you guys have got toys in the background as well. I mean, I'm seeing some great stuff.
Yeah, Brian's toy game is pretty legit.
There's a lot going on back there.
The only one I can see Super Mario. Some Mad magazines down there.
Mm-hmm. That's the I believe that's the 1978 Star Wars version of Mad magazine. I also have we have Bib Fortuna. He was one of the basically Jabba the Hutt's bodyguard, I think.
Yeah.
And he's got sensual human legs for some bizarre reason. I have a feeling this toy did not sell well to children. This is not a fun one. But
of all the Star Wars universe characters, I don't know that there's a huge Bib Fortuna kind of cult out there. I think
the one-man army right here.
Maybe you're more of a Max Rebo guy, part of the Jabba's Palace band, the keyboardist. Yep. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of all the aliens in Jabba's Palace and creatures and monsters in general. So,
Brian,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say like that this is like your desert island. Like if you can only bring so much, what do you bring? Because like fans of IGN should know that Brian and Max have the most amazing collection of toys and collectibles at the IGN office. But you actually went and you were like, these are the only ones that like I can bring with me.
Yeah, we were told we couldn't go to work anymore, and I very much followed that. But I also snuck in on a Sunday morning when the office was dead.
That's not following that.
Yeah, that's quite the opposite of following that, actually.
Yeah.
I had 3 big grocery bags, and I filled them up with toys and walked 6 feet away from the security guard, and he looked at me like, have a good weekend.
So we're looting now. So this is
we're looting now.
I remember working at a website in the early 2000s. Remember the first .com boom?
Yes.
Remember the first one where they got it wrong and they were like, it's like TV. We should spend money. Like they hadn't figured out yet that you make the users provide the content.
Right.
And I worked at one of those early .com, like the Australian version of like, what was that one that Spielberg and Ron Howard was at pop.com?
Yeah.
That were always like portals
Probably.
for content that would be made in-house.
Mm-hmm.
I think a couple of wealthy companies in Australia spent like 50 million each creating this website. And I was like I guess I was 23 years old. I was like the movie guy. And it was hilarious because it was like the inmates running the asylum. Like I would come in and like, it would literally be like the older guy who's actually in charge of everything financially would be like, well, what do kids like? And then whip pan over to me with my feet up on the end of the conference table, just going, let me tell you, Krusty, what the kids like. I'm an expert in youth, all right? I am a kid. And instead of being like, you're fucking fired, the dude would be like, well, tell us. You know. Speak to us, thou oracle of youth. And I managed to keep this job down until one day, it lasted for about 6 months, and then one day these weird guys in suits, it was very early 2000s, open plan office, exposed wooden ceiling beams, and lots of people sitting on inflatable balls instead of chairs.
Mm-hmm.
I can picture
and
it.
Everybody had those Apple computers that you could see the guts of the monitor.
Yep.
And these guys came in suits and were like, and we're looking around like, who are these, people that look like Hugo Weaving from The Matrix? and one of them said, oh, we are from, William Peterson and Shaverson, we want everybody to pack up their things. This company is done. And so we had to get out of there, and they had a security guard doing pat downs, and I managed to get a DVD copy of The Three Amigos and The Terminator, that down in my pants. And the security guard who was doing pat downs at the door did not find the DVDs. And
you put them in the right spot.
That story was a journey I didn't expect.
It was a long journey. Yeah. I don't know how many people are still watching this IGN now. I think they've pretty much logged off after that story. Only the diehards are still listening, and they're the only ones I want, the pure of heart.
That's true. That's true.
Right. Let's get now that we've weeded all the tourists out, let's get down to it.
Yeah. I don't want any goddamn tourists.
So here's what we're gonna do today. We're going to be watching The Invisible Man. If you want to watch along with us, we'll be talking over it with Leigh, giving some commentary and some insight into the movie. So what you do, go to theinvisiblemanmovie.com to rent the film, so that you can play it at home along with us. So that's invisiblemanmovie.com to rent the film, and go ahead and make sure that's all squared away and queued up. We're going to start it right from the start, from the very top of the Universal logo here in just a minute. But while you guys are getting that sorted out, let's just start talking about the movie really generally. Leigh, like what was it about The Invisible Man that was interesting to you? What made you want to make this movie in the first place?
Well, it wasn't something that I was burning to make. It wasn't something that I was pursuing. I've just got to make my dream Invisible Man project. I obviously knew about the character in the same way that, my grandmother knows who Dracula is. Like everybody knows who the Invisible Man is pretty much on the planet. But I hadn't thought about that character, and I had just finished making Upgrade, and I was really happy with how that turned out, given the money and the resources that we had. And you really get bitten by the action movie bug. Making movies involving action, stunt sequences, whether they're fight scenes or car chases, it's a very addictive drug. It's as you guys know, a lot of filmmaking is quite monotonous. Anyone who's ever visited a film set lasts about 10 minutes usually, because they're like, oh, I get it. It's completely boring. And it doesn't seem like anything's happening, but that's not the case with action stuff. Like with action stuff, your heart really is racing when you're like, 3, 2, 1, action, and 2 cars smash into each other. Like, you really have to do that. You really do have to. And it's way more mind-blowing in person. You're like, in a movie, we've seen a lot of car wrecks, so it's not exactly mind-blowing. Believe me, in person, you're like, so that stuntman's going to drive that car into that wall, huh? Sure hope he lives.
We're doing this on purpose, huh? That's great.
Yeah, I'm like, wow. And so Upgrade, I want more fight scenes. And then this movie dropped into my lap. If you had told me at the end of Upgrade, the next movie you make is going to be mostly set in one house and it's going to be a domestic thriller about a woman, I would have thought you were crazy. I would have been like, no. The next film is going to be, The Matrix. So I went to a meeting and somebody at the meeting suggested The Invisible Man, just the title. And that's how it all came about. And it kind of crash landed into my life. You know what I mean? As opposed to me like seeking it out. I was incepted. Like I walked away from that meeting and I couldn't stop. Basically, the end of the story is that the person at that meeting said, what would you do with the Invisible Man? And kind of like Ron Livingston in Office Space, where he just keeps failing upwards. Like when there's no pressure, you're at your best. What do you do here at this company? Nothing. That's the kind of attitude we need here. Because I'd never thought of making an Invisible Man movie in my life, if somebody asks you what you would do with a Star Wars movie and your life's dream is to make a Star Wars movie, you're like, well, I'm sorry, can I have a glass of water? So what I'm thinking, is it hot in here? I'm sweating. There was none of that for me. There was no desire to make. So when the guy said, what would you do? I put my feet up on the desk. How's this for a comedy callback? Gentlemen, you thought that internet early .com boom story wasn't going to pay off? You're wrong.
Yeah, we're back.
This is the longest play for this bit, but I love it.
This is the longest play for this bit. And so when the guy said, what would you do with? I was like, just no pressure. I was like, well, I would probably have a woman escaping a relationship with a guy and she goes into hiding and then he comes after her, but he's invisible. And then when I left that meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, actually, that might make a good film. And I could see an opportunity to make it scary, basically.
Yeah, I read a story that you had said that the folks at Universal were talking about, well, how do you make a character like the Invisible Man, your protagonist, in today's modern day and age, especially because it seemed like the other iteration of the Invisible Man they were looking to do before was going to focus on that character. And your response, as far as I had read, was that you were like, well, you don't. He is the villain, like he is a bad guy, and you kind of spun the entire script in this movie on the perception of that. I rewatched Hollow Man, which was obviously inspired by the Invisible Man as well, and I was like, oh my gosh, coming off of this modern version and then revisiting that, it's like a completely different context of positioning that character, and it's so much more interesting now to see what you did here.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for saying that. I mean, I guess that was my instinct. Like, the more mysterious the Invisible Man is, the scarier it'll be. Usually Invisible Man stories, going back to that original novel and that original James Whale film, are focused on the Invisible Man, is the title character. My instinct was, let's make it about somebody who is being hunted by this thing. Like then you get to live the movie through the eyes of that person, and you get to be as scared of the Invisible Man as she is. That was just my first instinct anyway. I tried to keep that answer short to allay the sheer panic that I could see in your eyes before when you were thinking, is every answer to any question we ask during this next 2 hours going to be as long as these stories he's spinning off?
I think I'm going to start a counter. I'm going to start a running counter of how many times you put your sunglasses on and put your feet up on the desk. So that's let's go ahead and make it. Let's go ahead and make it 3 right now, and let's get into the movie because frankly,
is there a movie where somebody does that? Oh, is that like? Am I thinking of like The Secret of My Success or something?
It's a very Michael J. Fox thing to do. It really is.
Like the whole I got it, boss. Don't worry about it. that is my off the cuff, never rehearsed.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson. Michael J. Fox.
You nailed it.
You're doing surprisingly great Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
All we ask is that at the end of tonight, if you want to go outside and slide across the hood of a car, and then maybe spray a little Banaka in your mouth.
Most of Michael J. Fox's, if you look at Back to the Future, which is arguably his most popular role, he's all kind of unsure of himself and like, you build a time machine out of a DeLorean. But if you look at the rest of his oeuvre, he tended to play the confident guy.
Yeah. Right. He was Doc Hollywood, for God's sake.
Doc Hollywood. Yeah, he was the secret of my success. I don't know. Maybe that's what I feel anyway.
I feel like at some point in there we had a clean segue to start the movie, but it's gone now. So let's get into it. So again, everybody get the movie rented, get it queued up to the very beginning of the film. And I'm just going to go ahead and count us in, and we'll start watching this thing. So we're at 0.0 seconds here. The Universal logo is opening up, and let's play it on 3. 3, 2, 1, play. How'd that work for everybody?
Are we on?
I should also mention wherever you are watching.
Waiting for a response. You're like, everyone.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, chime in. I will also mention, be sure to mention that wherever you are watching along with us, make sure you leave a comment either on YouTube or in the IGN Discord, wherever you happen to be following along with this. We got producer Nick is keeping an eye on the comments and the questions. So if you have anything you want to ask, feel free to put it there, and we'll be keeping an eye on that.
He is our invisible man for this stream.
Right.
I should say, just to start it off, that I was given the option of what if the Universal logo disappeared, went away. You know how some movies these days tend to want to incorporate the logos into the movie, which I like. I saw a cool one the other day for Zombieland 2, where the Columbia woman starts bashing the zombies.
Yeah.
And so they said, "Do you want the globe to disappear?" And I said no, because I didn't want to step on this title sequence. I was like, I don't want to put a hat on a hat. Like, I want the credits to be the invisible thing.
Right.
I don't want the logo stealing my thunder, ladies.
Well, I think. Can you just tell everybody that you put the Invisible Man in the Blumhouse logo? Like, he's in the room there with everything's flying around the Blumhouse.
But I would, before these credits finish, I was really happy with what Greenhouse was the name of the visual effects company that did the credits. I was really happy with that credit sequence because I'm a huge opening credits fan. I love title sequences, and I don't know. I guess you always want people to be talking about it, but I am really happy with how they turned out.
I love this whole opening sequence for a lot of different reasons. The first being you use, I don't think, any dialogue for the entire thing, which I know is the irony of talking over it right now, but it's so tense. It's all physical storytelling, and the camera and Elizabeth like saying what's happening. But it's also that you drop us in at this point after so much has happened. Like we at least as far as she thinks right now, are towards the end of her story where she's making her escape, but we get all the context we need of like what she's experienced through watching her escape. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, I've seen you talk about how you were debating finding that balance, right, between whether to actually show any abuse that happened or just start after the fact, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many different versions. Like, I think I still have right in my drawer here. This is the benefit of my home office. I have the scene cards. Let me grab them. I'll be back in 2 seconds. I'm going to disappear. Okay, so
He's still sitting there.
We should have just had you talking off screen this whole
That's
time.
it.
What were we
I know.
thinking?
So these are the original scene cards
That's so cool.
that I had mapped out on my little board. So let's see what it says first. Oh, it says credit sequence, invisible title cards revealed through mist. That was the first idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was a different opening. In the original opening, it says military officer search. So it was a bunch of people coming to his house and looking for him with like heat-seeking, goggles. So I guess it went through a few iterations before I hit upon that opening, and I feel like it was the best way to do it, was just to drop the audience right in there, like you said, with no information. And I felt like it was the best way when people read the script, because anyone who read the script, the producers or people involved would always say like, oh, I love this opening sequence. And so you sort of start to get the feeling that it's working, by people. Most of the time when people give you their thoughts on a script, they're telling you what's wrong with it. So on the rare occasions that feedback they'll write in the great. So yeah, but I think the trust of the audience comes into play, because you're like, when we test screen the movie, people would say things like, well, I didn't like the start. I need more information about what she's running away from. But the problem with the test screening, I don't know what thoughts you guys have on this subject of test screenings, is sometimes I feel like if you put people in that situation and you ask them for an opinion, they'll give it to you. They'll think of something.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like
they're looking for something.
Yeah, you don't usually view a film in the context of, let me write down what could be better. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So,
right, especially like sitting down from the start of it, thinking like, I'm going to find 5 things I don't like about this movie.
Right. Yeah. No, and instead of sort of deliberately experiencing something the way it was set out to be, you kind of approach it with the mentality of, I must nitpick this immediately, because they'll change anything. And then I can tell my friends, I changed this movie forever.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, totally.
This scene is a prime example of how you start, a lot of the tension in this movie is the questioning of where Adrian is in corners, right? Like, where is the invisible man in a scene we can't see? But I love that you start playing with this idea of the camera being its own character and its own perspective for the audience, separate from hers so early on. At points when obviously he wouldn't be invisible because we see him in bed right then. Yeah,
totally. I mean, that was something I wanted to do from early on, even during the script writing stage. I was like, I want the camera to kind of tap on the fourth wall, in the sense of I want it to like move away from characters that are talking and try to create a language that was this movie's own language, even a little bit. We're not reinventing the cinematic wheel, but even if any movie that I make, I try to think of one thing the movie has that belongs to this movie. Like in Upgrade, you had that thing where the camera kind of locked to the actors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In fact, with that camera panning away, most of the time I was thinking, are we doing it enough? Like in the editing stage, I was like, have we done this enough for people to notice it? And what you realize when you release a film is, anything you do that's different, even a little bit different, there doesn't have to be much of it for critics and pundits and audiences and people on social media to really pick up on it.
This shot right here, to me, this pan away, the first time we pan to the empty hallway, this is the whole movie for me. I love this shot, especially like right here in the beginning. And you just set up the sound design of the suit in the lab, the preview, that like insect crawling up the back of your neck kind of sound, like drop some of that in there too. So this pan to an empty hallway is so cool and sets up the movie so well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the first time we were doing that in the pan, trying to set up the language of the movie, and as I said during editing, I was like, should we be doing more of this? Do I need to be doing this more? And
call Elizabeth. We need to go back to that house and shoot some more pans.
Like it's I guess it's that thing in art. It's so subjective. Like you'll never know what was too much or too little. You just have to try a version. And maybe if I did that pan every second shot, do you think you would like it as much? Or would you be like, they're doing this too much, they're overplaying their hand?
I think I am always a fan of less is more. I think it probably, it's the type of thing that, when you, especially at the beginning, you build up to it later, especially when, spoilers, this movie's called The Invisible Man. He's around, he is invisible scenes later. But I think like that pan that Clint pointed out in particular is one that really stood out to me early on too, because I was like, oh, is he there? And you kind of just feel unsettled because I watched a really great video breakdown kind of discussing how you were, I think Insider made it, discussing kind of the camera movements and how traditionally in filmmaking, when the camera pivots and positions on something, it's because it wants you to see something there. So when it moves and you aren't seeing something, you're like, oh my God, what am I missing? Like what is here? And it makes you almost ultra focus on it. I
mean, that was exactly the reason for doing it was because the audience is so knowledgeable about movies that, like, for instance, look at this shot coming up. I wanted a lot of these shots. See this shot on her back? Like I wanted a lot of shots on her back because I think in the audience's mind, we've been taught to think that that must be somebody's perspective. If we're looking at the back of someone's head.
Right.
So for me, it was a way of making the audience more tense, was to be shooting her at these odd angles and trying to make the audience think, wait a minute, should I be nervous right now? Like I never want to let them off the hook in any way.
Yeah. I really appreciate the sound design in that, and the way that scene builds up, how it starts with very small things. Like there's a little bit of water, there's the pill, and then the dog bowl scraping across the floor, and then the car alarm. And like the audience is on high alert by the end of that. Like my palms are sweating by the end of that.
I know this shot here was fun to shoot. It was like 3:00 in the morning and that where he runs up to the window. It was a tough scene to shoot because this car that they're driving was actually a trailer that was being towed, it was one of those shooting days that you have on every film shoot where nothing seems to be going right. Everything goes wrong to a comical degree, to where you're like laughing. It almost becomes funny. Like, what else is going to happen? Is the first AD going to drop dead? Oh.
Sunglasses on.
So the only thing that got me through that particular night was that shot where he comes running at the window, and I was like, okay, if all else fails, we have that shot.
That's a great shot,
right?
Yeah.
I also
if you guys are just joining us, just tuning into this, let me just get some business out of the way real quick. Make sure you go to theinvisiblemanmovie.com to rent the movie and watch along with us. We're live here with Leigh Whannell. There's a time code also on screen right now that you can reference to catch up. If you're a little late to the party, you can fast forward straight to the point that we're talking about in the movie based on that time code. And in the meantime, we do have, before we have a couple of good questions from the audience that are kind of on topic for some of the stuff we were just talking about. Where did it go? It's getting rearranged on me here.
I'm going to say it is disconcerting to be doing this from my office because I suddenly run through my body like, wait a minute, is there like the best of Dutch animal porn behind me? You know what I mean? Like,
is there the best of Dutch animal porn?
Only I can answer that question.
Yeah, you tell us, man.
Once you raise that question, I mean, now it's in all of our heads.
Now it's in your heads, right? I'm just, you can never be too careful. You never know. Okay, continue.
If it determines to be yes, please let us know later because I'm curious.
Yeah. We'll have to jump in, zoom in up there for us. So Mandego on YouTube has asked, was there ever any version or initial cut of the film that never had Adrian reappearing again after this opening sequence?
No.
Was there ever any thought to where he would just stay invisible the whole time?
Yes, at screenwriting stage, the first draft of the script, you never saw his face. They still met up for dinner at the end, but I wrote in the script that he's only ever shot from behind, so you never see his face.
Got it.
and Jason Blum and Cooper Samuelson from Blumhouse were both like, no, this is not the time to go all Sundance on us, was the quote. and they were like,
That's perfect.
And they were like, I think Cooper, who's one of the best executives out there, in my opinion, he is sort of the film guy at Blumhouse, and I think he's probably said something like, lethal. No.
Well, the casting of Oliver came right after The Haunting came out, and like I don't know about you, I was so obsessed with that show. I was like, my sweet Luke, I'm so glad he's going on to other really exciting things. But then obviously you have this awesome actor who you do see a very small amount of the movie. So how did you guys like find the balance of letting him develop that character, knowing that it probably would be no one or a guy in a green suit for the bulk of the movie?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I guess it comes down to who you can cast. Like, obviously, for a role that size, you can't get Ryan Gosling, to come on board unless he happens to be your best friend from grade school. But with Oliver, he's up and coming. He's so talented, and he did The Haunting of Hill House. But he was one of those actors that was not only willing to do this role, but he auditioned. He cast from his like flat in London, and I'd seen a lot of auditions for the character and some great actors, but there was a tendency to lean on the. What I loved about what Oliver did is, without even speaking to me, he nailed what I wanted, which was a really charming, almost self-deprecating guy. I wanted the audience to be like, wait, this guy? Like, but he's so nice. He's so, and I didn't want him to be charming in the way that, like, debonair psychopaths in James Bond films are charming. Like, welcome to Monte Carlo, Mr. Bond. Like, I actually would say to Oliver on set, I would say, you got to be more Hugh Grant. It's got to be. I want you to play someone who's the lead in the rom-com. Like, don't. And so he was like, all right. And so he was really being, because narcissists and they're really good at being charming. That's how they get people in their web. They don't display these traits. They're very, very charming, and so that's where I kept pushing Oliver, and I think he was so good at doing that.
There's obviously a bit of Elon Musk in there, correct?
I think there's probably a bit of the tech mogul thing there. Like, that's obviously a new kind of celebrity, tech mogul celebrity. We live in an age where tech moguls can be as much of a household name as an actor, and so I wouldn't say Elon Musk specifically, but there was some kind of like, tech mogul blender concoction happening. Right.
Where there's sort of the nebulous gray area of how much good are they doing for society? Like how evil can their technology be manipulated,
So we just passed the point in the movie where she finds out that Adrian is dead. And I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw this movie, I was like, where's Zeus? What happened to Zeus? Is anyone going to go back and take care of Zeus? My poor sweet Zeus, my sweet baby boy. I'm like such a dog person.
I hear that. It's funny. That comes up so much. So many people have said, like, I keep getting the same tweet saying, thank you for not killing the dog.
Right. Yes.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, they must really kill a lot of dogs in movies. People must really be waiting for the dog murder, which I would never think of doing that. But like, people are obviously very scared about, you can kill as many people as you want, but if you put an animal on screen, it's like, don't do it.
Animals and kids. They're too helpless. Well, I watched Hollow Man to remind myself on other Invisible Man adaptations before this. They kill a dog, and it's very sad because it's a very cute dog. It's an invisible dog, but they kill a dog. Very cool.
It's such a shorthand to make a bad guy. You can just manufacture a bad guy and they hurt an animal.
This movie, no dead dogs. 10 out of 10.
There's no dead, but you could say that the dog was a little bit of a shorthand for her. thing. Like,
Yeah.
she had an opportunity to leave, and she put herself in jeopardy to take this perimeter collar. So the dog has a shock collar on. There's two different types of shock collars I discovered in researching. There's the bark collar that shocks the dog when they bark, and then there's the perimeter collars. And so
Right.
I don't know if anyone picked this up, meaning I don't think we made it clear enough. I didn't shoot it properly, but the collar is a perimeter collar, which is supposed to be kind of, I guess, like a metaphor for her. You know,
That's what I assumed when I watched it, that it was a perimeter collar.
But going back to that opening sequence, just the visual shorthand of the whole thing, all of the exposition that you need there, and it's stuff like that with the dog, like, oh, she's the type of person that would save a dog, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like it's almost like exploiting a dog in the opposite way. So instead of saying I'm going to show how evil this guy is by him hurting the dog, I was like, I'm going to show how good this person is, what a great human being she is, by having her risk her safety to help the dog, to at least take this collar off it and take it away so it doesn't have this shock collar on.
And you did a great.
A lot of, yeah. We're gonna say.
I was just going to say you did a great tweet along of this when it came out on digital on Friday, and a fan pointed out and you agreed that the Zeus name was indicative of Adrian's god complex in general as well, an intentional.
Yeah, like it's fun with that opening scene. I guess I needed his house to say a lot about him. And, you know, so the kitchen, how clean everything is. These San Francisco shots, by the way. So this is Sydney. It's not San Francisco. The scene that we're looking at now. So we digitally altered the background a little bit to throw some San Francisco buildings in there, but I haven't heard too many people say, "Oh, that is clearly not San Francisco." So hopefully,
yeah, no, I've lived there for 10 years, and you had me completely convinced that you shot the movie there. So, yeah, I think this is
Michael Dorman, by the way, who is an Australian actor that's been around for a long time. He was in an Australian kind of drama called The Secret Life of Us in the early 2000s. It was like a really popular Australian TV show. So I've known of him since then, but this was my first time working with him, and he really enjoyed playing a worm.
Yeah. I was going to say, what I appreciate here is that you've now introduced multiple characters who I think the audience does not fully trust. There's a lot of unreliable narrator happening with the main character, and then you introduce him, the brother, and he already just immediately has this kind of look. I don't know if it's the mustache, but you're kind of like,
nothing wrong with a mustache.
You're like he has that mustache.
Hang on a second. No, I do think this scene is another sort of turning point in this movie, where this is really the first scene where we start sort of actively questioning whether or not Adrian is in the room. Like he's literally, or you know, his ashes are in the room, and he points out like, oh, you're with him in the room right now.
Okay, so I can say, I guess the movie's been out now. He is in the room right now.
So yeah, that was going to be my question. Was in every scene, did you guys always talk about, like, is he here right now?
I would talk about it with the actors that were appropriate. So I told Michael. So Michael, who plays Tom, his brother, he would perform for Adrian.
Right.
Interesting.
And so there used to be, we cut it out. There used to be a scene in the in that little lawyer's office scene where I panned away from Elizabeth Moss to an empty chair.
Yeah.
And I cut it out of the movie because I thought it would get a laugh.
When we get to the next scene with Tom, I actually have a question about Tom and Adrian's like that brother dynamic.
Okay. Well, this scene is actually one of the only happy scenes in the film.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had fun shooting it because I just enjoyed. There's a certain aspect if somebody's being terrified in a movie and they think that someone's out to kill them and maybe they're holding it. There's a certain surreality about that. There's a certain gap in reality that you have to fill. Like, because most have been in a situation where we're holding the kitchen knife. This was one of the only scenes in the movie where everyone in the room has lived. Every actor in this scene had lived through a happy, life-changing moment like this, and so I felt like the actors, it was just such a touching scene to watch them. There was a real truth to it because they didn't have to be like scared for their lives, which is fun to shoot. But I just loved, I actually was like tearing up on set because like she was giving this great gift to her and they were all crying. It was really moving because it was like the one time we got to have a little party on set. And then as soon as this scene was done, it was like, okay, cut, next up, Elizabeth is being terrorized.
I was gonna say, did you save that for last? Was that like the rap scene in the movie where it's like, let's nice?
No, it was pretty early. Actually, the set that they're in is a built set. This was a big thing during the making of the film, was that because we shot in Sydney, you would think that Australia is very similar to the, and on the surface it is, but when you dig a little deeper, it's very different. The houses are different. They're built with different materials.
Huh.
It's very hard to find the exterior of a house that for me would pass as an American house. And we finally found one, but we could not find an interior. We were originally going to shoot in a real house, but given that I've lived in the US for 15 years, I appointed myself sheriff of whether this feels American or not. And I could not find a house interior it's hard to explain. There was nothing, and so we actually ended up building it. So everything you're seeing right now, her bedroom, is a set. And one of my biggest worries, believe it or not, was, will the audience, these are the kind of stupid things you worry about on a film set. I was like, will the audience know that this is a set? You would constantly hear the word SETI on the set of this movie. Like every day, 10 times a day, someone would look at someone else and be like, is this too SETI? And
I would say it's set-ish, set adjacent.
I want to ask. I want to ask about the scene too, because we now have you captive. You can't leave. You're here forever. So I get to ask you every scene: is he actually there? So this is one of the first instances of where one of many things we're talking about.
He is actually in this scene, and that scene you mentioned before that you liked, Clint, where the camera first pans away to the hallway. Right. This is, I think, the second time we do that. And I loved, a lot of people got really scared by this bacon and eggs, by the way.
It's a big
sound jump scare. You get a cat meowing, bacon sizzling.
It was
we can't watch this scene without pointing out that there's a small community of people on Twitter that really lose it over what Aldous Hodge is wearing in this scene.
I mean, I would say I'm in that community.
Yeah,
we're in a safe space here. It's just the four of us. And
can I just say that Emily Saracen, the costume designer, and I had no idea. Let's put it this way: we were not dressing him for maximum eye candy. Yeah,
sometimes you get lucky. No.
He had a big say in what he wore. We let him be really involved, so maybe he had a clue as to what would look best.
He knows what he needs to wear.
This scene stresses me out so much. And so I totally watched the movie for the first time, assuming that the camera was playing around. Like there were things like that scene with the lawyer early on and the one in her room when it pans away, where I was like, it's just like setting me up for wondering when. It's making me so much more stressed out now, even watching in this setting, knowing that he's always there, because I'm like, oh my God, they let their guard down and they assumed he wouldn't be there. And how did he get in? But I love the way the camera, like in the last scene before this, where the camera's following her, but then it moves away and then she's walking in and out of frame. And I don't know, I love when you can get to be playful like that. And it's really interesting as a viewer to watch something that's just like visual storytelling is different than the very traditional kind of action horror.
Well, the shot that did it for me too, that shows that Adrian was actually in the house, was the scene prior to that, the tail end of the scene where they're all celebrating, and we cut way back to down the hallway, and it's a really long shot, sort of like somebody's looking around the hallway. So it's like that to me was Adrian's POV there, and so he's definitely in the house from now on, from that point on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. I think as soon as you point the camera at nothing, I think if the movie's called The Invisible Man, the audience will be suspicious of it. So I really had fun doing this stuff. where we were just pointing the camera at nothing.
Yeah, no, it's a blast. Speaking of the fact that the movie is called The Invisible Man, I'm going to segue cleanly into reminding everybody that go to theinvisiblemanmovie.com to rent The Invisible Man and catch right up with us. The time code is on screen somewhere nearby me in this box. So check that time code, rent the movie, theinvisiblemanmovie.com, and catch up with us to continue watching along with writer-director Leigh Whannell.
Because it's all happening now.
I'm a huge horror movie fan. I'm a huge movie monster fan, and I think that what I love about really good horror movies and movie monster movies is that they slowly and steadily introduce that sort of the villain's capabilities. And in that scene is the first time you really start to see that the Invisible Man is not just a monster in the traditional sense. He's just not just a violent person, but he's also specifically creating a universe where no one is trusting the main character anymore. It's deliberately starting to make her look like she's making mistakes, she's going insane. And so for her to just wreck what would be a pretty, like, I've made bacon and eggs a million times. That's never happened to me, you know? And so if that was to happen to me, I think my wife would walk in and be like, is everything okay? Like, are you all right? And so you start to establish his character as somebody that's sort of, he's a nuisance in a way, in starting small. And so how much did you guys really start to ramp that up, or like how did you sort of develop that idea of him almost playing pranks on her to make her seem like she was going crazy?
I kind of mapped it out during the screenwriting process. Like during the writing of the script, I have this board, and I showed these scene cards that I was showing before. You see they have these little Post-it notes on them, like orange and blue and pink. Like they would indicate for me, like when he did something that was changing the landscape of the main character's life. And as you said, I was like, I had to graph it out. Like, okay, we have to start off small. You can't just open with the biggest thing. And then it's one of the fun parts about screenwriting is kind of mapping out that ramp that you were talking about, where you sort of start small and build, and you chop and change. You kind of play Tetris with it a million times before you settle on a version. But I think pretty early on, I thought the first thing he should do to her is just turning the gas up on, just even starting that kitchen fire. For me, as you said, it's kind of an innocuous thing. It's something that other people would just be like, you could easily brush it off. But then I hoped that the audience would be like, oh, that something. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love doing that. I think I had a million different ways he could do that. Like,
well, and this scene that we're watching right now is chock full of them. Like with just the door being open behind her, and all of these cool little all of these cool little things that he's doing. There's a question that we had user named Toronto Freddy, who's watching on Cinefix right now. Is wondering why did they was wondering about the handprint on the shower scene on the glass door of the shower that was in the trailer, which was that shot just for the trailer? Was it cut from the film?
It was cut from so we shot it for the movie. Everything you see in that first trailer was shot, but the thing is, we hadn't even finished editing the movie when they cut the trailer. So they actually cut the trailer together using dailies. They just were like, oh, this is a good scene. And then we ended up, it ended up working out for us, because when we released the trailer, everyone online was like, they showed too much. And I'm thinking, like, actually, a lot of what they showed isn't even in the movie.
The chat is popping off right now in Discord. It's really fun. I just switched over real fast to see what people were saying. Art says that they're disappointed. They said, oh, come on, that would have been awesome. You'd never seen his face, LOL. Going back,
what did he say?
That he liked the idea of not seeing Adrian's face. That would have been a cool thing.
He said that would have been awesome if we hadn't seen his face.
He wanted more Sundance, is what he's saying.
It's funny.
Put the shades on, put the feet up, and go full Sundance.
Well, it's like I always want to lean into these things that are a bit unique and different. And it's interesting where people draw the line. Like, the producers of this film were fine with me panning off to nothing, but they draw the line at never face. And the reason I think I ended up not going that way is because it feels too much like an aesthetic choice. Like the character version is to meet him, because then you actually get to hear him speak, and you get to. I think it's more interesting to find out who this guy is right at the end than it would be to just completely block his face. I do agree with that comment that it would have been kind of cool to make a movie like. Have you seen that movie where they never show the guy's face? I like, but I just, in the end, you have to, I think, choose the stronger character choice.
There's also a good question from Andrew asking, technology make its way into the story? It may not have been intentional, but modern technology is a monster in itself in the context of an abusive relationship nowadays, and the film captures this horror so well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean,
it's interesting. I never really saw this at the time, but when I was writing this, but in hindsight, I can see a lot of parallels between this and Upgrade, the film I made before this, just in terms of, I seem to have this subconscious fear of tech that keeps bubbling up, as you guys experienced earlier when I was trying to log into this whole thing. Not the techiest person in the world.
Well, we weren't going to bring that up.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was just for us.
Yeah, that's a video you'll leak later.
Recording the whole thing.
Exactly. Once I get over the best of Dutch animal porn controversy, then we'll have to deal with that. I feel like tech for me is the best way to make the Invisible Man grounded, or as grounded as it could be. Like when you think of the Invisible Man, you think of the guy drinking the potion, like, I'm alive or whatever, or it's always a serum, in every superhero movie, it's like, it's like the serum. I must inject it. And I never believed the serum. Like, I can't convince myself that a serum could turn you into a superhuman. So I was like, how do I get away from that? And it seemed like tech was the best. Once you do a little bit of research on invisibility, it doesn't take too deep of an internet rabbit hole to realize that they are working on this. They are actively trying to come up with invisibility camouflage for soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing that gets worked on, and so I was like, I feel like I could do a version of that people could almost believe in 2020, where they could be like, yeah, I could see Elon Musk coming out with an invisibility. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I've been in like a specific amount of conversations with like friends at bars and parties and stuff like that, where we're talking about superpowers and superheroes and invisible people and stuff like that. And there's always that conversation about like, well, if they put on clothes, did the clothes turn invisible? When they drink milk, do you see it? But turning it into a suit, like a shell, sort of answers all those questions, because you don't have to worry about that anymore. Anything that he would technically ingest into his person. And I'm sure you guys had some conversations like this, right?
Well, we did. This is a good time. It's funny. We haven't done much of a commentary for the movie.
I just realized he was an Upgrade too.
That's Benedict Hardy, an actor I love who played Fisk in Upgrade. I just asked him, do you want to come and do this one-day role for us? And he was gracious enough to say yes. I love him. He is the world's nicest human being, but he always gets
mustache.
Bad guys. Always.
There's nothing wrong with the mustache. Look,
there is now. There is now.
All right, fine. Next time we do a watch along, I won't have it. But
visual storytelling, Clint. Mustache equals bad guy.
If you want people to love the mustache, Clint, you need to just shave the sides off and go for that Charlie Chaplin look.
Sure. Yeah,
that'll do the trick.
I'll keep the mustache. I'll keep the mustache, but I'll also have to save a dog on camera. But this scene, and speaking, I think we made the point earlier about how many people that she meets that are just kind of icky, right?
Yeah,
like that is the sense. And here's another guy that the dynamic in this scene is just so uncomfortable.
Well, it was interesting in sort of thinking about that aspect of the script and thinking about this idea that women live their lives with their keys between their fingers. It's kind of shocking to think that I spoke to a bunch of friends of mine, like female friends of mine when I was writing the script, just asking them about various things, just to get their perspective on certain things in the script. And one thing that kept coming up was like comments you would get,
Right.
and just, I think it's supposed to be harmless, but it's sort of like a slightly uncomfortable comment that these friends of mine that I was talking to, they would talk about having to laugh it off, because then if you make an issue of it, you're seen as the bitch, or she's crazy,
Right.
I just said one innocent thing, I was giving her a compliment and she freaked out on me. And it was interesting. I guess it's stuff that I'm aware of in a general sense, but it was interesting to talk to friends of mine, some of whom I've known my whole life, and I've never had that conversation with them before about sexual harassment or things that, and it was, I don't know, it was pretty enlightening. I mean, in the specificity of it and the personalization of it. So that character in that scene, even just his offhand comment, like, why'd you go to Paris? Is that where all the beautiful women of the world have to go as a rule?
Yeah.
And
so
her having to laugh it off and be like,
There's been like, oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, like, there's been so much conversation about microaggressions is what they're called, essentially. And like, I think that like this movie, to your point, like does that balance really well. And obviously gaslighting has been something that people have been talking about, like a real life abusive relationship issue that especially women face, and where it like he's fully gaslighting her right now.
Yeah.
And it's so stressful to watch, because you're, as a viewer, she's probably more right than not. You've gotten the clues from the camera movement that like she maybe isn't crazy. But I'm curious, like, was there a point that you were looking to find the balance of like maybe having the audience question if he was actually doing this to her, or if she was making it up, like to feel more like her friends that maybe he's dead, obviously.
I mean, I gotta say, I was never really that interested in is she crazy, is she not crazy? I've seen movies like that before, whether it's The Tenant or whatever, those movies where the whole spine of the movie is this person crazy or is it really happening? And I've seen some really great versions of that. But I guess it just wasn't that interesting to me that I would have, if I had written that movie, I would have gone a lot harder on the whole, like, she's just making it up, she's just imagining it. What was more interesting to me was the idea of the most interesting thing to me was the gaslight aspect, because I feel like in movies that portray domestic violence in any way, we've seen a lot of physical stuff. We've seen a lot of films deal with somebody being hit or somebody being physically assaulted. When I was writing the script, I was chatting to these women who worked as counselors at a domestic violence shelter. And in talking to them, just in listening to them, I wasn't really listening and writing down and asking them questions, but what really struck me was the idea of gaslighting and changing someone's reality. Like, and so I started to think, this is a really great metaphor for the invisible man. Like the invisible man is the ultimate gaslighter. He can be in the room with you. You can never prove that it's happening. And so I guess that just became really interesting to me. I actually went back and watched that film Gaslight, which is, it's, I really found that interesting, and maybe I felt like I hadn't seen it very much in movies. I mean, this is where your readers are like, you're wrong. That, I'm going to get called out here on just how many movies have featured gaslighting, but in my mind, I was like, I don't know if I've seen this as much as I haven't. I feel like it's a really interesting way to explore this character, So yeah, I'm it's gratifying to hear people say this movie has a lot of truth to it in that respect because, it's a sensitive subject, so you don't want to be phony. When you don't want people to be like, God, that movie really, really was didn't get to the truth at all,
Yeah, it also sort of begins to peel back the layers of how far he's willing to go to control her, because your first introduction to him as she's getting into the car shows basically the lengths that he'll go to physically withhold her in place, which is bashing through a window and pulling her back. So right off the bat, you immediately know this is not your like typical relationship, and then that kind of subsides for a while, and it becomes a lot more about like you were saying, the sort of the microaggressions of like figuring out little ways to turn everyone in her life against her until she sort of feels completely desperate and alone and isolated.
And also just to break her down mentally, like one of the things that one of these counselors I spoke to said that they had women that they'd worked with where their partner, and they'd be like, "Where are my car keys? Where are my car keys?" And their partner would say, "What?" And would start going off on them about it and be like, "You lost them? You moron! How could you lose them?" Do you know what I mean? Meanwhile, they've got it in their pocket, and in hearing that, I was like, "Wow, what a ruthless game to play with someone, to like hide something from them and then start verbally abusing." And that was another avenue that I thought the Invisible Man could really sort of, just little things like taking away her job stuff would, in real life, it would really make you flustered if you were in the middle of a job interview. In the same way that if your boss was like, "Okay, I need that thing now that you said you would have for me," and it's gone.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
right,
this is
right.
this,
I was going to say right here in this scene with this like a long hallway shot, I play with that a lot in this movie, and it sort of has you looking in the corners of the frame a lot to sort of pick apart, am I going to see movement? Is there going to be something there? Because this is the scene where you see the relationship with her sister collapse based on a message that she didn't send or did send. At this point, you don't really know.
Right.
And so now you're watching her personal relationships fall apart. But structurally in this shot, was it intentional to get a lot of these sort of like harrowing long hallway shots where your eyes are kind of meant to dance around, and like this one right here,
Right.
are you seeing it from his perspective?
In that scene, you're not, but yes, I was trying to do that. Like I was Stefan Duccio, who's the cinematographer. He and myself really wanted this film to drive people crazy. Basically, we wanted to see if we could make something where you never get, how usually there's kind of an EKG chart for thrillers and horror films where you'll have a spike of adrenaline, something bad will happen, and then you'll have a little relaxation period. We're just hanging out for a while. We were trying to make a movie where there was never a relaxation. It's not like we never cut to the scene where the friends were just hanging out and you could take a breather and be like, "I'm fine." We wanted to kind of weaponize every corridor and every room in the film. So as you said, we wanted the audience to always be like, "Wait, is he here? Is he not here? Should I?" So to hear you say that is great, because I'm like, okay, cool. It kind of worked, on some people. It worked for some people to be like constantly questioning the movie,
But was he in that last scene with the brother at the office?
No, he was not in that scene, and that's why the brother was honest about how he felt. He kind of, when he says, I was glad when I heard that he was dead. I said to Michael, he's not in this scene, so I want you to tell the truth about him.
See, I was wondering if, because he was so sort of smug in that first scene, and then in the second scene, the last scene, he had changed his tune a little bit. So I was wondering if there was some like strategy that was happening in the background where he was like coaching. He's like, no, you gotta play along and be a little nicer to her, so that like that was all part of the manipulation.
I think it started out with him playing along, and then in the middle of him doing his little act, he actually spoke the truth about his brother. And so when he says, he controlled me long before he ever met you. Like, he's telling the truth. Like, he's as much of a victim of Adrian as she is. You know,
and this scene here. Sorry to jump on you there, but like the scene where Sydney gets slapped. I mean, talk about this point in the story and the links that Adrian's gone to now that he's actually physically attacking people.
Yeah, so I guess in that sort of ramp that Brian was talking about before, we started off small. I guess I wanted him to like really put start putting the boot on the throat of her whole situation. So he needs to cut everyone out of her life. So he's fractured the relationship with the sister, and now she's got this trusting friend, James, and Adrian attacks the one thing that James cares about the most, the daughter. So I guess at this point he's really starting to break her down, and start to break off those relationships.
And now we as the audience are as freaked out as she is, because we know that he's in the house with her. And you have, like, obviously you have this shot right here where you're like, he could be anywhere. My question is
interesting. Like that, with that shot, did you think like, oh, is he up on the ceiling? Or
he's spider walking around the ceiling?
To me, it's like he could be anywhere, but like, I mean, she has this is to me is like, it's nice to be the viewer to be able to say, if I was there, whatever. She grabs the flower, but what was kind of your logic in figuring out, like, at which point would you just be like, here's paint that I'm carrying around with me everywhere. Here's like a bunch of flour that I can throw to see if you're there, if you think that like he's in the room. What was kind of the balance with like her logic and
I think she's like really losing it. She was already on edge. She was already suffering post-traumatic stress when she got out of the relationship. So it doesn't take that much prodding from Adrian to get her to this place. And I guess at this point where he's hit Sydney, she grabs the coffee and she's just looking for any way to prove that he's actually there. Mm-hmm. And so she spreads it out and sits there and is waiting. She's thinking that he'll walk towards her or something. And she ends up having this conversation with the doorway where she hasn't slept in a couple of nights, and she really feels like she's talking to him and kind of having this one-way conversation. It was actually a really fun scene to shoot, this scene for me, because I just was in awe of Elizabeth's acting here in this scene. We did it a bunch of times, and on lower budget films, this film I guess you could say is a lowish budget. You don't have the luxury of a lot of takes, but in this scene that we're watching right now, I just insisted. I was like, we can't stop until we've got it exactly right. And then I remember Elizabeth and I would have this thing where she knew when I was just saying we're good. She would say, "Are we good?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And she would go, "Okay, one more." And then she did one more, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. The last take, she just nailed. I was like jumping up and down. I have this really bad set because I'm wearing headphones and I'm looking at the monitor. I just go into the world of the movie and forget that I'm surrounded by people. So I'm actually doing this. Let me do my impression for yourselves and for the viewers. Me on a set watching a scene with Elizabeth. So I'll pretend that that's like, like it's so. And then all of a sudden I call cut and I look around and there's all these people. It's so embarrassing.
You were clapping that whole time. We have to do that take again.
I know. I'm ruining takes. I'm like laughing and crying and like. When she did that last take of that conversation, I was like, yes, I was loving it. It was like, it's so beautiful to watch an actor be, I mean, every take she does is amazing, but this last one was like transcendent. I was just like losing my mind at how great she is. So, yeah, I just had a lot of fun shooting that.
I'm going to keep asking these questions. Was he in the doorway? Was he listening? I'm like, wrapped audience, I can ask you for every scene of this movie.
He actually was there in that particular scene. He actually was kind of standing off to the side, like staring at her. that whole time.
He's such a manipulator in this movie, but I'm curious, like obviously, and I'm curious how much you guys played with that. Like he is literally an invisible character, but how much were you guys imagining that she was kind of pushing his buttons and getting under his skin as the movie progresses? Or not at all?
How much was he pushing her buttons as the movie
No, the other way around. Like, was she getting to him a little bit? She like, you know, when she's having that conversation with him and talking to him, like she knows the things she can say to upset him.
Right. I think at that point she's not getting to him. He was completely enjoying it, how much he had broken her down.
The scene freaks me out so much.
I wanted to talk about this attic sequence because this is really the only sort of quintessential horror kind of setting. Like you're in a dark, spooky attic, right? Yeah. And even then, it's wide open space in there when you shine the flashlight around. Like there's not much in this attic, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that because I said to the cinematographer Stefan, I want this is going to be our traditional horror movie scene in the sense that it's all dark. We're in an attic, and you know, cinematographers love darkness, so he was loving having that to play with. And then I wanted to light the whole scene just with the flashlight, so there's actually no other lights. Like Stefan wanted to put some panels in they built this attic set, so it was like a set. And it's funny you said it's the wide open space. I wanted it to be the first crawl. I didn't want, you know, usually in the movie she opens the door and it's this huge thing, you know, it's like
just a whole other room. Yeah.
This is claustrophobic to me, but Clint has been in his garage for a week, so
right.
Funny how movie cameras change the perspective. They shrink things and make things larger. The set was actually really cramped. It was really cramped and hard to shoot in there. And I kept saying lower, like lower the roof. Like it has to feel so cramped. But you're right. It's more of a quintessential.
Yeah, I think the openness I'm referring to is just like normally there are cardboard boxes and cobwebs, right, yeah, totally. and this is a fairly clean space.
Yeah, I just wanted it to be like one of those crawl spaces that never gets used.
Yeah,
and it's, I guess this scene is the first time she really does. You know, like you asked before whether when he gets rattled by her, and I think this is the first time when she throws.
The scene stresses me out so much.
Yeah, seriously.
This is a good time to tell you all I'm a huge baby when it comes to horror movies.
You came to the right place.
Yeah, this couldn't be a safer environment. You're watching it with 3 other people talking over the room.
In the middle of a bright room.
Yeah, you got plenty of lights on in there too.
Yeah, it's great. Everything's great.
So this, I guess I didn't want to do too many, for lack of a better term, jump scares in this movie. But if I was going to do it, I wanted it.
This
rip people's face off.
This is such a good one. And to circle back to the trailer, like this shot was in the trailer, and I was fully expecting this to be towards the end of the movie.
Right.
Because
like,
it's such a good jump. Like
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things when it's in the trailer, your first instinct is always like, "What are you doing? You know, save this stuff." And then, of course, the marketing people are like, "We need to sell the movie. You got to give us something to work with." So there's this tug of war that happens. There was a version of the trailer with the restaurant scene in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No spoilers, guys.
We'll circle back to that in case somebody's watching this for the first time. But I'm glad that found its way out of the trailer.
Right.
Yeah, like when people say, "Oh, you're showing too much."
So here's another this other sequence, and I want, this is a really, really cool scene that we're just starting out on. So if you can walk us through like just how it's built, because it crescendos into just such a cool bit of violence, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Well, it's I guess early on in the film, sometimes when I'm writing, I usually put together a soundtrack, and I'll start imagining almost the trailer for the movie before I've even started writing. I'll be listening to music and I'll be imagining the movie, and different images, like almost trailer moments, will come to mind, and you just write them down, and some make it into the movie and some don't. But when I did that for this movie, one of the first things I was picturing was the main character, this woman, being sort of pulled around a kitchen. I could just see this image of her being dragged. And so I was like, basically from that, I wrote this scene, and I just thought it was like a visceral way to express the Invisible Man's violence. Like, fight scenes in movies, action scenes, they're just so done to death. There's not many things you can do in action that are unique. You always have to be looking at, like, what can I do that's different? And so, like, with Upgrade, we locked the camera to the actors, and that was our little way of making our action scenes a little bit different. In this one, I was like, well, one of the people in this fight scene isn't even visible. So I felt like we could really construct something unique. And we actually found a stunt coordinator in Sydney who owned his own motion control rig, which is a robot camera. And that's how we filmed everything, was using this motion control.
And the score in this sequence too is awesome.
Yeah, I said to Benjamin Wolfish, composer, like, I want the score here to be really unhinged. Like, it needs to sort of come apart the way she's coming apart. And he loves that. I mean, yeah.
We do have a question from Nuclear Phil on YouTube about how many takes this sequence took to shoot, because it's kind of a long take here on the back half of it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we didn't have that many. We did not have that many takes because, it's a lot of setup, and the motion control camera, it goes where it's programmed to go. And so if Elizabeth doesn't hit her mark, we miss her, and you have to start all over again. And so we did a lot of takes, but I think we had one day to shoot the whole scene.
Yeah.
And it was a stressful day because you just, unless it's perfect, it's not worth doing. Like, if you're using a motion control camera, which has this perfect movement, then everything else has to be perfect. It's almost like the actors have to become robots as well. So yeah, it was quite a few takes before we got that one.
And can I just say the fact that she hits him with plates was maybe my favorite part. Like, that was there was just something so perfect about, like, seeing her hit an invisible person with plates was wonderful for me.
Nice.
I don't know if you guys have that, like, anxiety though, where it's, fortunately I don't alone, but what I did, where it's like, okay, if someone did invade my house, like, what would I do? Like, what you see people always know, and like grab the giant butcher's knife and like all this stuff. But I agree in that scene where it's like, she's grabbing whatever is in the nearest drawer. When I saw the movie the first time, I assumed that was a lot of wire work to get it done technically, but I saw some BTS stuff, and you actually had a guy in a green screen suit, right? Like,
yeah, he was in the green bodysuit, and it was a bit of everything. It was wire work with the green bodysuit. Any technique was on the table to get it done. We even had, like, props people hidden in cabinets. They would
pull it open.
When the table goes over, that was just a rope being pulled by some people off camera.
Oh. Yeah.
So there was.
Well, that is fun, and we've had some people too talk about watching some of these classic Universal monster movies, which the classic horror movies to me were all about those sort of those fun camera tricks and, like, early optical effects, and they were really experimental for the 30s. And
absolutely,
you think about the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde POV mirror stuff, and the Invisible Man, obviously from 33, of having him take off his mask and everything. Like, how much? In fact, there's a question in Art again, I think on IGN Discord, was asking about the classic Universal monster movies, and which ones should he have queued up in terms of influences on this film?
Well, I would say, I mean, obviously the original Invisible Man is something to queue up just in terms of the legacy of this character and seeing what as an interesting counterpoint to this movie. In terms of influence, some of the older films that I watched weren't necessarily from the classic Universal monster canon. Like one film was Cat People, the Jacques Tournier film, which is an incredible film in terms of using atmosphere. And what I love about it is it's all about what they don't show. And there's a lot of shots of I love this shot right here. Got to call out.
I want that house.
I was just going to say, like, you're walking through the house again for the first time since she left. Like, what was some of the goals here with this scene?
I guess it was like her going back to the hornet's nest. Like, this is the most stressful place for her. This is like the sort of white hot center of her anxiety. But she was willing to go back there because she felt like in the opening scene when she turned off the security cameras, she turned around and she heard that noise coming from this little lab room that we're looking at now. And then she's been hearing that noise. She's heard that noise, and she's basically put two and two together and is like, I feel like there's something. She's taking the risk that she wants to prove that he has somehow achieved invisibility somehow.
Right.
There was some piece of evidence that she could come away from the house with that could prove to people that he could do this. She doesn't know exactly what that thing's going to be when she goes to the house, but she remembers this room and she remembers this strange apparatus kind of holding up this. I think that sound. I think she's starting to connect the dots. But
we lost you for a second, Lee. That part dropped out.
Oh, sorry. I think she's basically putting two and two together, that there's some connection there,
So I didn't realize this until till watching again now. But on his phone that she finds in the attic, the screen background is basically exactly what she's about to find here, right? Was that intentional, or am I projecting there? It looks like the design is the same as like what the phone background was as what we see.
The suit?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very intentional. So it's like so a lot of people, I saw one guy on Twitter, what a joke. A guy designs an invisibility suit just to stalk his ex. And
what else would you do? Okay.
and I was like, yes, men would do that. No, he doesn't design the suit to stalk her. He's in this business, like he's in the optics business, and this is what he's done is create this invisibility suit to sell it. But in my mind, he hasn't gone out into the world with it yet. It's still in the sort of prototype stage. And then when Cecilia runs away, I guess he's gone so crazy and is in such a sort of psychopathic rage about her leaving him that he uses his invention against her. It's not like he invents it for the purpose of stalking her. But I love the music, I should say, that Ben Wolfish came up with here as the suit gets revealed. It's, if anything, just to go back to that question about the classic Universal monster movies, to me, this scene where you reveal it and the music, to me, that is where that Universal monster influence came in, where it's that music crescendo where the monster is revealed. It's the moment in Frankenstein which still is a great moment where he's like, it's alive, as the lightning strikes.
Yeah.
Those moments where, those music in the classic Universal movies, the music, it was so melodramatic and so big, when the monster would be revealed. And so I just kind of wanted to go big or go home with that scene of the suit reveal. Like, let's just lean into it and be like,
it's awesome.
This is the monster. This suit is the monster.
You certainly did not go home.
I was going to say, this entire sequence is, I think, my favorite part of the whole movie, because specifically, I really like the way the sort of visual language of having sheets over all these things in the house that makes them, obviously your first identity as a viewer is ghosts. Like you're like, that's a very classic look for a ghost, but it also shows this place is shut down. But also just the cool ass sci-fi of seeing that suit revealed for the first time. It
Right.
feels like, you know, it feels like if this guy was using this power for good, he'd be in the MCU, you know, like
Right. Yeah, it is a bit. I was always
it's
careful.
a reverse Iron Man.
I was always saying on set, you know, let's not go too Iron Man in terms of the look of his lab. You know, I didn't want to be. I didn't want it to be too over the top sci-fi, and the suit. I really liked the look of it, but the lab I didn't too Tony Stark. But I think this is a good opportunity because a lot of people have asked about how the suit works, and I've never really gone into it before. So I
was going to ask how much thought went into like the actual science behind it.
It was a lot, and we ran it by some actual scientists that could work. So basically, the suit is covered with all these camera lenses, and the cameras take thousands and thousands of photographs per second and map any room that it's in. So any room, any angle change, any movement, the cameras adjust and take thousands and thousands of photos per second to map it and then project the result onto the other side. So for instance, the camera on my back here would project here on the front. So the theory was that the camera, by mapping out any 3D space that it's in and projecting it and adjusting for perspective, you would never see him. And we talked to some scientists at UTS in Sydney about it, and they were like, they basically said, yes, this could work. We don't have the technology yet. There's no camera that could do what you're describing yet. But in theory, there's a version of this that could work. It was really cool. It was really cool awesome to have these. And we were talking to people in the optics department of UTS in Sydney, and so they were really actually excited by it. They were doing notes, and they actually started arguing with each other and being like, well, no, you would. And they were actually coming up with formulas and things. They had a lot of things that you would. They had a lot of things that you would need. So they kept telling us, like, to do this, you would need X.
Yeah.
I have so many questions about the things.
The great thing about that sort of near future science fiction is you can kind of get away with like, we're on the bleeding edge of this actually happening. We're not there yet, but this is a fun little tangent to look at. But real quick, I just want to remind everybody that we're watching The Invisible Man with writer-director Leigh Whannell. Go to theinvisiblemanmovie.com to rent it, and you can catch up with us based on the time code that you see on screen right now.
Yeah, and I was going to say, for this scene, I don't want to give anything away, but Leigh,
yes,
talk us through it.
Okay, the restaurant. Okay, no more 209. So the restaurant scene. This was a really fun scene to write. Like, I love writing these scenes where you pull the rug out because, you know, a screenplay is written to be read. So that's the first goal is, can I intrigue a reader? And so I actually try to write it in a way that makes people go, what the fuck? And so when it came time to shoot it, I was like, man, I really have to do this right. I have to live up to it. And so the whole aim of it was to do something that was so shocking. I wanted it to be a safe space. We talked about before, I was saying before how I never wanted this movie to have any scenes where the audience was like, oh, I can relax for a minute because she's hanging out doing yoga for a while. I wanted it. And so I thought, if I can structure this scene like one of those moments, like the moment in the movie where you can relax.
I fell for it.
Yeah. And so that's why I insisted on the restaurant being really big and cavernous. We found this restaurant called Est in Sydney that has been around for an eternity in restaurant, 15 years. And it's like a zhuzhi restaurant in Sydney. We turned it into like a Chinese restaurant called Yulan, and we had a whole name, and the people that ran the restaurant were kind enough to let us use it. And we had it. It was noisy. There was music, everything to make the audience think I'm safe here.
Right.
Like and so it's all about misdirection, like being a magician, like the magician's like really the yeah. And so that's where right now like I felt like if I could get that right, everybody would be like, what?
Oh man! And even that sharp right-hand turn of the camera.
Yeah, it's such a major turning point in the film too, because you gave the audience 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, where we think she's in control. She's invaded him. She took his suit. she's gonna win. This is it. And then it's like, no, she's now framed for the murder of her own sister. Not only is her most personal connection to the living world now gone from her, she's the culprit.
This shot here we're looking at right now, where oh my god, like those moments on set I was talking about where I'm just like, yes, like what Lizzie did. I was just like, we did a couple of takes and then I said, Lizzie, I really need you to go off the cliff. And we didn't even use it for that long, but I'm telling you, there exists the Snyder cut of this scene out there somewhere.
Careful.
Careful. Sorry.
You'll never escape that hashtag.
You'll never escape that. I'm with you, Snyder cut people. I love Zack Snyder. I want to see the Snyder cut. We let, there's a thing in movies where you just let the camera keep rolling and you can almost feel the actors going like, it's almost like, are we done here? Like, get this?
Just trying to see you say cut out of the corner of their eye.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you can have fun with them and torture them by being like, not going to call cut. I'm just going to see what you do here.
Yeah.
And that scene when Lizzie dropped the knife, we just didn't call cut because I just wanted to see, and she like really lost it. It's almost it was such a shame to have to cut away, during the editing process. You hone it down, but there is a really long take of her just losing her shit, and she's just so phenomenal. I thought that the hard cut into the psychiatric hospital would be really jarring, so that's why I was like, I'm just gonna I'm not gonna drag this out. I'm gonna get her right into that psychiatric hospital.
She's such an incredible actress too. So even when she's like, from this point out, she's like, and she's lost it, and you get to see her just have that full range that she does incredibly well in this and stuff like Handmaids.
As you just said, this scene right here where she gets dragged in, she was going ballistic, right? And I said to the I think we only shot it once or twice. We only did one take of her being dragged in, and I said to the other actors, I really want you to drag her in and strap her down, and she's going to be resisting. You need to be ready for her to kick you. And I said to Elizabeth, are you comfortable? You really have to resist. I don't want this to be like movie resistance. I want you to be really trying to get away from these guys. And are you comfortable with that? And we all had a big chat. Everybody was comfortable, and I was like, let's do it. And they put her down on the bed, and they're trying to strap her in, and they really had a thrashing around and going ballistic, and she's crying and her mascara's running, and then we call cut, and I came in and I was like, there's that hushed tone that falls over a set if the actor's doing something really emotional. As soon as you call cut, there's this hushed tone of respect. And I came into that room and I was like, are you okay? And she looks up at me with this mascara, her eyes are totally red, and she was like, and she said, you kidding? This is my happy place. And nobody enjoys going ballistic. And I think this is evident in the roles she chooses. Nobody enjoys a breakdown like Elizabeth Moss. In fact, if you give her a scene where she has to be like, hey, girlfriend, let's have a margarita and chat about the good times, she is like, when are we done? I tell you, Elizabeth Moss is at her happiest when you say, I want you to go in that room, no crew will be in there, just the camera, and we're going to put the camera on the guy's shoulder and you just go ballistic. She is going to be like, let's do this. She is just so happy. So anyway, sorry that
that's
perfect. But she really loves it. So from here on in, when she was doing the psych hospital stuff, she was always in her happy space. I think you can look at her roles that she's done and be like, oh, now I see the through line.
Well, you even see where Peggy Olson went to and became such an iconic character. She evolved, and I feel like so much of Elizabeth, obviously she's not having the same level of breakdowns in that as she's having here, but I feel like you can see that.
She does. Even with Peggy Olson, she seems to gravitate towards these roles. A woman is not what she wants to say.
Yeah.
The entire series of The Handmaid's Tale is basically about that. It's about someone who's standing there who really wants to to kill the person standing in front of them, but instead has to say like, "What a blessed day,"
Right.
but in her eyes, you can see that she wants to kill the guy, but she's saying, "What a blessed day," or whatever. And the same in Mad Men. Like, you could tell in her eyes that she wasn't happy, but what was coming out of her mouth, "Yes, sir," or whatever. So I don't know if it's an unconscious thing, but she does seem to gravitate towards these women who are being like really put upon by patriarchal forces.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have that catharsis too, like when she's able to play catharsis. Certainly in Handmaids, like I felt to me that's why the shot of Peggy finally saying "fuck it" in Mad Men and walking out with like her box and the cigarette and everything on it is
right.
so iconic because it's that catharsis of she.
Look like, oh yeah,
No,
Yes!
that's right. There it is.
Yes.
That's
I wish that
four.
was an intentional set.
you guys thought I had forgotten the sunglasses, but no.
I love that you have the set the scene cards too. I wonder if you remember if there were any other really fun, interesting like distillations of some of this if we're watching.
I'm gonna show. Okay, hang on. What have I got here? Oh. Okay, so here's the scene card of the restaurant scene. So that's the one. What does it say there? Hang on. Sister's throat is cut. Knife put in Cecilia's hand. Police arrive. Cecilia breaks down. And I've
Set
written like a
piece.
set piece.
Yeah.
That's this is proof that you
Just
should
leave a
never
note that
do
says,
stuff
"Figure this
online.
out later."
Set piece basically for me
Right.
means like this is a big scene in the movie, and I can look at when you put the movie up on the wall. My eyes have to be able to scan it and see enough scenes where I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like it's like
Right.
punching the audience in the face where you're like, and you can rearrange them. Like, okay, something hasn't happened for long enough that I'm going to put this scene over here. Do you know what I mean? But that is kind of embarrassing. But what were you asking? Is there any other interesting cards that?
Well, really, I wanted to see the restaurant scene card, so I'm glad that was the one.
That was the one.
That was the one that floated right to the
Yeah.
surface there.
And then then there's the one immediately after. So this one says Cecilia is taken to a psychiatric hospital. Hysterical, she is restrained and sedated. Keeps saying he's in the room down the bottom. So this was written before I started writing the script. So a lot of these scene cards didn't make it into the finished movie, but that's an example of one that made it all the way through.
Andrew in the IGN Discord chat, a little bit of he said wanted us to tell you that the paint shot earlier with Adrian is a perfect throwback to the window scene in your directorial debut, Insidious Chapter 3. Def underappreciated.
I love the Insidious Chapter 3. I don't hear people mentioning that one a lot. You know, it's not like it's hard for people to have a positive reaction to anything that has a number 3 on the end of it. You know what I mean? Like even when I was directing the film, I was agonizing over it so much. And someone at Blumhouse, who shall remain unnamed, was like, "Leigh, it's part 3." You know,
like it's Chinatown. Get out of here.
Yeah, it's Chinatown.
Always
Jake.
about it.
Like, no matter how hard you work, no one's going to appreciate this. You lose 60 points on the Rotten Tomatoes rating. You're minus 60 as soon as you're a horror sequel. You start at minus 60 instead of 0. So the thinking seemed to be like, but I swear to God, I treated that film like it was Long Day's Journey into Night. So thank you, IGN user / commenter for mentioning that film.
I mean, it's interesting though because we have you in Laura, most iconic like modern horror franchises with Saw and Insidious and everything. So what was interesting or challenging to you then having to go into one of the most classic horror universes with the Universal monster movies and reinventing it?
It was funny because I never really felt that much pressure with The Invisible Man. I don't feel like his cultural footprint is as big as some of those other Universal monsters, Dracula. And I feel like there's more room to breathe with a character like The Invisible Man, where I feel like if I was making a Dracula movie, I really felt that pressure. And then the second thing is that I felt like the best tribute I could pay to the Universal classic monsters was to modernize it. Like, there's a version of these Universal movies that really pays homage to those original movies in a very set in London in the 1800s. And there's fog on the ground.
Right.
And the actors are all like, "Good day, sir." And like that to me is the literal face value version of an homage. I would love to watch that movie. I love Victorian London. I love watching that stuff, but I don't necessarily want to make it. Like the version I was interested in making was the like Gone Girl version of this. Like, what is the most clinical, modern version of it that I could do? And then before this scene finishes, this was one of the most fun scenes to direct because the two actors, I just loved having them go at each other, and it was kind of delicious to have. For a lot of the movie, they're not saying what they really think. It's kind of great to take the gloves off, especially when you have two actors as great as Lizzie and Michael. When you take the gloves off, oh man, there is no greater feeling of pleasure than directing a scene with two amazing actors who are playing characters with nothing left to lose.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
right, they're both being so honest in this scene too. Like there's nothing to hide from each other, and it's just, here's how I'm going to make your life hell.
So
exactly, and I feel
is
like
he there? My favorite question.
He is there in this scene. He is there, and you know, for this one, Elizabeth spent so much time in this movie being sheepish and feeling. And what I love about that scene is she's got, to use a popular internet expression, no more fucks left to give. And I love. That's why I love that line where she says, not the line, like I love my own dialogue. I love her reading of that line where she says, "You're just the jellyfish version of him." Like it's. I said to her before she shot the scene, like, you just don't give an F anymore. Like you need to tell him what you think. And you don't. The funny thing with Lizzie, you don't have to give her any direction. Like halfway through your direction, she'll just be like, "Yep, got it." Like
understood. We're done.
Sometimes you're like, but wait, I didn't even start. Like I'll go over to her and be like, "So in this next take, if you could just," and she'll be like, "Got it." And you're like, "Okay, I didn't actually get to what I wanted, but I feel like she does have it." And then you'll go and she'll do it, and you'll be like, "Yeah, she has such an intuition for. She already knows what was lacking or what you needed or what, because she feels it too." So. So that was so fun to watch her just in all this stuff, like where she's kind of changed. Like now she's like, she has a plan and
she's hospitalized. Her sister was murdered right in front of her. Like she doesn't have any system and Adrian is tormenting her. What more can happen?
Like when you're at the bottom, you can she's like, I'm going to try this suicide escape plan because if it doesn't work, I really don't care anymore.
Yeah, so this is another real interesting turning point where she kind of goes on the offensive here. And the sequence that's coming up is really pretty incredible. It's another one of those sort of long take escape sequences here, but
yeah, I mean, this was a point. I wanted the film to really become unhinged. Like the thing with a monster movie, I feel like
I can't.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
No, I'm sorry. I'm like, I can't watch.
Oh, you can't. Yeah, I have trouble with that.
Sorry,
I feel like Jaws really set the precedent. Inadvertently, Jaws created this thing that monster movies from that point on followed, which is the template of you don't show the monster, you don't show the monster, you don't show the, you show the monster.
Yeah.
And
what a great way to show the monster finally with her stabbing the shit out of it.
Yeah, stabbing him like.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I've noticed some movie was until all of a sudden it was an action thriller, and I was thinking like, look, it's the Invisible Man. It's a monster movie, right? Like
right.
you know, I don't know that I definitely wanted to see this monster in action. I wanted to have he's been exposed. She has now got him on the back foot. And you see this suit, like, I don't know that I could have resisted shooting this scene, you know, and you know, the action movie part of it is so fun if you can get it right. We used emotion again in this. We're not quite there yet, but there's a shot coming up.
Yeah.
It's actually 3 different shots stitched together, which was incredibly hard to do, to find the cut point, because everything has to match.
Right.
So there.
Well, and again, once we get out in the hallway here, this is a very clean, bright space, which is
which I
anti-horror movie.
Yeah,
and this reminded me a bit of Upgrade too, and kind of the way that you shot it and used the camera again as its own character in that storytelling.
Oh yeah. I mean, thanks. I mean, that's the most, you know, gratifying thing to hear, I think, of anything. Compliment anyone could pay this movie. People saying like, "Oh, it felt like your movie," or there was this reminded me of Upgrade, which I guess is another way of saying, you know, it reminded me of your past work, because I feel like
that gunshot to the knee is just.
By the way, squibs. I hate doing digital squibs, because I feel like the blood is never. It's just never quite right.
Right.
So when we used an actual, that was a real old school squib blowing his knee out.
Nice.
Can I ask a very dumb question?
Can I just say it shows, and on behalf of literally everybody else, thank you.
I feel really stupid. I don't know what a squib is. Is that just like the blood pack?
Blood bag.
Okay.
So
Just call it that.
A squib, I guess, is film industry slang for those blood packs that explode. So, like, you know, when you're watching the last scene of the Wild blood things, it's just these squibs, and they're really fun because they're set off by a charge. It's like dynamite, basically. Yeah. So it's like 2 buttons go, and then they're really loud. And as I've worn one before as an actor, and there's kind of a tense moment when they're rolling, because not only do you want to get it right, but you're aware that it could be painful. There's always that little 5 second
it's
speech
literally an explosion strapped to your body. Like, it's
totally. It's like, and by the way, they give you the warning the way American pharmaceutical commercials tell you that this drug could cause tongue hair and lung cancer. It's like a really quick, like, it's like, okay, guys, we're good. And by the way, this explosive could go into your chest and cause lung damage.
Right.
And you're just like, huh, what was that last bit? And then they're like, and action. And blows up. And
well, that was a goopy Paul Verhoeven-esque squib that I really do appreciate.
You know,
we're coming up to an Easter egg, right? If I'm not mistaken.
What's that?
Isn't there a sequence where you have some graffiti on a building outside, or did we miss it or not get to it yet?
Like a Saw reference?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yes. We're not to it yet.
Okay. We should point it out when it comes.
This scene. I love Stefan Ducio's cinematography in this scene, and I also love Will Files, the mixer for the film. His sound design. He said to me, we had music on this scene. Ben Wolfish had written this tense music. And this parking lot sequence, Will Files said, I think we should just use the sound of the rain. And he's such a talented sound mixer, and he's just so brilliant and so creative. Like, we would have these interesting conversations during the mixing stage. You know, when I'm watching a Coen Brothers movie like No Country for Old Men, why is the sound so pristine? What are they doing that other people aren't? And you know, like when Josh Brolin discovers that crime scene and with all the dead people, why is it so beautiful? And Will said, because you can hear it. Mm. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, usually movies layer up sound effects and then put music on top of it, and everything sits on top. He's like, the reason you think the sound of the keys just swinging in the ignition in that scene in No Country for Old Men, the reason it sounds beautiful to you is because that's the only sound that you're hearing. It's less sound. Yeah. It's not like a better recording of keys. but you can hear it. They haven't put music on top of it and wind and whatever. And so I think what Will did in this scene with the rain. Sorry, I keep thinking like there's people actually listening to me right now. I have to stop myself from rambling. You guys, if we do this again, right, would you guys have some sort of shock collar device that you could hit the trigger on if I start talking too much? You could actually electrocute me.
We put the proximity collar on.
Yeah.
I mean,
you just can't leave the room. It's not that we can stop you from talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now you know what it's like. If I was having beers with you guys talking about movies, this is what it would be like. It would be like me rambling off about 10 different and getting off topic and then forgetting where I started. But I just love the sound in this scene because I think Will, in stripping everything out and saying, let's let the rain, you realize how movies sound, these artists, these mixers, if you give them a chance to be great, they'll do it, you know. But they're usually being told, no, we need music on top of it.
Right.
Well, and the other thing that I really like about it is thematically it works the same way as the visuals do, right? I mean, we're spending a whole movie looking at empty corners and empty hallways, and like it's so quiet, and like we're filling in the gaps of like what can be there. And so for this sequence to, you know, with the sound be doing that same thing, I'm just like, you keep waiting, like I'm waiting for that. As a film goer, I'm trained to wait for that music sting that's going to tell me when to start being scared, and it's just not there yet, and I don't know what to do with myself. You know, it's such a tense scene without the music there too. So it's like anytime every part of the movie works together that way, like those are the kinds of things that aren't immediately evident other than like, oh wow, that was a really effective scene.
And that for me is the most fun part of filmmaking, is when you're in post, you've shot the movie and you're now making creative decisions. You know, it's so fun because you don't have 100 people looking over your shoulder. You don't have a producer sitting there. You're just on a mixing stage with a bunch of creative people.
Real quick. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
sorry, sorry to jump on you, but
you see it one more time. There.
Okay, there's a dumpster back there with.
So basically, I always put that Saw puppet face. I put it in Upgrade as well. And then James Wan, he's put it. That thing has had more cameos in movies than Alfred Hitchcock did.
My favorite is in Aquaman.
Yeah. Totally, I know. It's just this thing. I guess James and I are both like, part of it's fun, like how can we squeeze this in there? But part of it's like, this guy got us here.
Yeah.
Neither of us have any doubts that if it wasn't for that goddamn puppet, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you guys right now.
Well, is it weird for you that like this is the year where Saw is being kind of re-visioned with Spiral coming out? Like everything's full circle?
I mean, everything's weird to me about what happened with Saw. You know, I think it's a testament to the power of low expectations, because James and I, when we made that film, we were not hoping to dominate the world. We were like, if we're really lucky, we'll get a straight to video release. We'll be in Blockbuster. and you know, if we're not so lucky, we'll have a pretty compelling demo reel to show people, like a 90-minute movie that we can show people and say, see, we know how to make movies. Give us some money and we'll make a real movie. The fact that our little demo reel made it into theaters and people were interested enough for it to spawn sequels is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. So here we're going back to, and this, for all intents and purposes, this camera move here, this is the Invisible Man's POV. Just sneaking back into the house, yeah?
It's actually supposed to be the camera behind him. So it's not his POV, it's looking at his back. But yeah.
Sure.
Do we have any questions? I feel like I haven't answered enough questions from the
Yeah, I have one right here from TV Dirk Scholar to the last big fight scene out in the rain. They're curious, how did you do the rain CG effect? She's got to be holding onto an actor, or is she? So kind of how did you make that technically work when she's grappling with Adrian with the suit flashing?
So basically we had an actor in a green bodysuit we had Oliver Jackson-Choen in the green talking to Elizabeth Moss, and then we did a take without him, and you just kind of combined. The suit was actually entirely built in a computer. It was all CG. So it was, I love what Cutting Edge, the visual effects company, did there. That was like, the visual effects are always the last thing. And so it was very late in the game before I saw a shot where I was like, oh, that's it. And I really loved it. I feel like I don't know, I felt like it was scary looking. Just those cameras, the way they look, it just has this weird, it almost looks like a Blade Runner version of a GIMP suit.
Is that how you sold it to Universal?
Yeah.
Totally. I was like, this is going to be an S&M thing. It's going to look, especially when they first trotted it out, I was like, wow, it's like a latex rubber black suit. It felt very sexual in a way, but there's something, I don't know, when I saw that visual effects shot in the rain, I was like, oh, this is going to work because it just looks strange. Yeah. It's weird.
Well, and I like how in this fight scene, the fight scene that we just saw as well here in the and it going back to the hitting him with plates thing, the how tactile the Invisible Man was. Like you could see people grabbing onto him and struggling against him, which I thought was really, really well executed.
Well, actually, in that last scene with Aldous Hodge, we didn't have anybody there. He just beat himself up.
Oh, wow.
Still in a very well-fitting...
still in a very... always looking sharp. And
man can dress himself. Yes. Can I ask a question about this scene as well? I mean, in the interest of, is he in the room right now as a question?
So here's what... This is a good... So when Adrian got away from the psychiatric hospital, he basically contacted his brother and was like, I need you to do this. And his brother, there's a little bit of a time crunch there, but his brother is basically doing this because Adrian asked him to do it. And this is the only time that Tom was in the suit. The rest of the time it was Adrian.
It was Adrian, yeah.
But he's so under the thumb of his brother, he'll do anything his brother tells him to do. So his brother was basically like, he told him to go and to kill Sydney.
Got it.
I love this shot here of the SWAT team. We were losing the light and I was losing my mind, but be a gift to the scene because it looks very Michael Mann.
That's your own scene, though.
Yeah, you wanted to.
What's that?
You said you wanted to open the film with like something really cool that you got to this into the end.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically like this scene here was almost going to be except I think I was going to have. Originally, I was going to have people coming in with a knowledge with a knowledge of his suit, so they would be wearing like these, heat vision kind of goggle things. But so this scene is, I feel like there's that misdirect there of like, so Adrian has basically staged a version where it looks like he's been innocent, his brother does everything, but then I wanted to quickly diffuse it by having Elizabeth's character say no, that because everything with the gaslighting has been about like making her look crazy and making it seem like her version of reality wasn't tracking, and so this was her. She's stronger than she has been in previous.
Right, that's the thing that really struck me about this scene is Elizabeth's performance is just she's so confident and so like. She's like rooted in the truth in this scene, like, and just telling people like it is, more so than she has been in the rest of the movie. It's a really, really cool shift in her performance here.
Well, she's been right the whole time, right?
Yeah.
She's validated that she's been right the whole time.
And like, it's funny, like that so much of the movie is in her perspective. It's all there's only like 2 days that she didn't work, but Do you guys enjoy movies where you spend the whole movie in one person's perspective? You know, those films where it's really like just one. It's just like whether it's Taxi Driver or a movie where it's like all one person.
Well, so I'm answering your question with an aside, not intentionally, but to someone, hold on, I'm scrolling back to find it. Someone had asked if you like the Sadie brothers films like Good Time or oh my God, why am I blanking on the Uncut Gems? Yeah.
Uncut Gems.
Because like to me, Uncut Gems is a prime example of like living in one character's head the entire time. And that movie is like the most anxiety inducing movie I have ever watched in my entire life. But like you're really in it with him, even if you can't relate to it. And I think you can play around with fun things within that, where it's like, are you in a character's head that you can't relate to really, like a taxi driver or Joker, or are you in a character's head like the Invisible Man, where you need to be in Cecilia's head to really be able to like see the world through her eyes, as everyone else is misjudging her.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. I actually, Good Time was just as stressful as well. That was really stressful. Those guys are. It's so amazing what they do, because making people anxious is kind of abstract. Like on a movie set, how do you make someone anxious? Like if you look at a film like Uncut, the character's getting into these bad situations, but I think it's really hard to make people as anxious as that film makes people.
Just put like, Kevin Garnett in your movie. That's all you need.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think specifically here you're working with a character not injecting herself in scenarios that are increasingly worse and worse. She's going to his house here, but that's to end. This is not her being like, let's gamble everything that's left. You know, this is her being like, I have to put this to rest, and I'm going into the lion's den to do this. Like I think you did a really excellent job of building tension in an opposite way, where you're rooting for a character not because you can't wait to see how far they go with their own demise, but because you want them to succeed, which is obviously the role of a strong protagonist.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the most cathartic thing I could think of was to her to go back to see him in person. Like you've spent the whole movie with him as this invisible entity, and now she is seeing him, and you're playing a lot of catch up. Like you're meeting this person that you haven't gotten to meet throughout the whole film, but he continues, gaslighting her and manipulating her. Everything he says in this dinner scene is kind of loaded, like to her, and he's just a great liar. So when she's asking him to tell the truth, he's really good at saying to her, I promise you I'm telling the truth. Even him saying here, like, oh, my handshake a bit, it's him pretending to not be in control to make himself.
Yeah. Although I was going to say real quick, as a father, one of the micro here is he's basically offering a pregnant woman sushi and wine, which is like,
I had the exact same thought.
Totally.
Yeah,
I was like, I know specifically she can't have those things.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
You're already failing as a parent, dude.
You're failing.
But I mean, how much of this scene and when you're working with him is like, how much of this is the truth according to him?
You mean the character?
Yeah, the character. Yeah.
I think like a really good liar. He's living this little ruse that he's cooked up, this reality. He's living it. So in his mind, he's a victim. He's convinced himself that his brother did do this. I think he's able to really skillfully live in the reality. And it's almost like the line between acting, the line between the lie and the truth is so blurred in his world. Like it's like I had Oliver watch all these videos of Ted Bundy. Like, there's all these great YouTube videos of Ted Bundy being interviewed. I'm just going to turn the light on. I'm noticing that the light is disappearing in this.
I know. It's finally getting ready for a spooky.
Yeah.
He's like, it's twilight out there now. So there you go. So I had him watch these. There's all these great videos online of, and the degree to which he believes his own lies and the degree to which he's able to sell it. It's incredible. Like the skill. I mean, he could beat a lie detector test because he was so. When the reporter would say, "Did you do this?" and he would say, "No," and he was so believable. So I just feel like Adrian is at that level of, being a sociopath and where he can really believe his own lies.
If he admitted to her here that he did it, in your mind, do you think this would have gone differently, or did she always knew exactly what she wanted to do?
I think it would have. I think if she knows that her friend is recording it, I think if he had admitted, that would have been enough for her to maybe walk away. She probably would have gotten up and said, she might have walked away with that. But I think she knew he wouldn't, though. There's no part of her that thinks, she does try to get him to tell the truth, but I think she knows deep down that he's not. He sort of talks to her in a coded way here and tells her that it was him by saying, he says the word surprise here.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which was actually, and then that's we went to London to do that as a pickup. It was very hard to recreate this whole dinner scene in London months later. But even though it was a close-up shot of Oliver,
just do it in close-ups.
Very hard to place it, and it extremely difficult. But
I did not notice.
I also do really love this scene as the way that the film ends after a car chase and an escape from a hospital and all of that delicious squib, like the action and stuff that comes up earlier and the jump scares and everything that are in this film, and then to end the movie so quietly like this, I think is really wonderful.
I really appreciate how you positioned him as this sort of monster in a castle all alone, this isolated person surrounded by these like giant stark halls. Everything feels so hauntingly lonely in this place. It's dark, it's grim. Like you're like, he's rich, but what does that mean? He's basically all by himself.
Totally. I mean, it's designed this like clinical, I guess it's the modern version of that classic Universal, like the castle on the hill,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that quick little cutaway to the empty chair that he's looking at too. That was great.
And such a good callback too.
It's I love movies that fold back in on themselves, and I do love symmetry. Like I like opening the film in that house and then closing the film in the house. And she opens her eyes. The first shot of the movie is her opening her eyes, and then the last shot of the movie is her closing her eyes. And so I just really like that kind of symmetry. I don't know why. Maybe I'm
and using the security cam footage too. I mean, there's a calling back to the visual language of the opening of the film is it in a movie full of like I'm expecting to look at something in this empty hallway, or I'm expecting a big music cue in that raining the parking lot scene. It's these visual cues at the end sort of signal that's like, okay, now we're coming to the end because this is where we started. So
she also didn't just kill him; she framed him for a murder. Basically, she framed him for his own murder, which I think is the perfect revenge.
I guess she weaponized his surveillance against him. She used everything that he's used throughout the film. She was being manipulative, like in that scene. There's a big part of her that's manipulating him as well.
Right.
And she, uses the suit against him, and she uses his surveillance. Like I basically wanted her to be able to use all his weapons against him.
And I like that it has that moment too before she before it cuts to the chair where he's like, wait a second, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
This is off. He has that of feeling unsettled himself.
Exactly. And there's the dog.
Zeus made it.
Zeus made it.
You're welcome, Terry.
Ironically, with a leash back on, but that's okay. Going to a loving home now. Does he have a leash in that? Did you see a leash in that shot? Maybe I wasn't looking. Maybe I was thinking of.
He does have. She took the leash off because you see it in the bag.
Oh, maybe I was seeing the bag.
And her taking off with the suit, like she's keeping the suit here. What are the implications of that for you guys on?
I don't know. I mean, we honestly weren't believe it or not, we weren't thinking about a sequel, but I wanted her to take it away, and I wanted to end the movie on a note of James, the character played by Aldous Hodge. I wanted him to know what she did. And so she's taken the suit out of the house, and there's this understanding between them that he's going to go along with her version of the story, and it's going to be a suicide. You know, they have camera footage of him cutting his own throat, and it's a suicide. So that'll be it.
Yeah, I read this ending sort of in two ways. It could either be she took this suit out of the house so that no one else can get it, and power and evil. And then the other side of my brain was like, she could now use this for evil. And who knows, you know.
I mean, a part of me thinks that she can use it to prove what happened to her. That's, you know, I don't know. I mean, I honestly haven't talked to anyone about a sequel yet. People will bring it up, and I'll be like, "Yeah,
the Invisible Woman."
Hang on.
Yeah, Jason Blum will be like, "Hey, let's talk sequel," and I'll be like, "Nope." But yeah, I loved ending. I think Ben Wallfish's music here I really love.
Yeah.
There was a great cue when he recorded the orchestra in London, so I went over there and watched him record in this great studio in London, Air Studios, and it's amazing to hear an orchestra that big recording this sort of stuff.
Okay,
It's also
that's you.
having that long shot at the end, and knowing for the first time in like 2 hours that there's nothing behind her is this
There's nothing behind totally.
So this is
That's
a dumb
great.
question to save for the end, but I
Right.
always, both times I've seen this movie, I've been curious, what is her relationship with James? Because she chooses him over her sister because she knows Oliver would potentially, she knows Adrian would potentially go there. So what is kind of, in your mind, their relationship that he would be the safer option, even with having a daughter and everything?
So he's a childhood friend of hers that she grew up with, but she hasn't seen him in a while. I think her relationship with Adrian took her out of the world for a while. So her sister is closer to James than she is. And I think, as you said, like, there's not many people. She needs to stay with somebody that Adrian doesn't know. Someone that, and also he's a cop, like staying with a police officer. And so I just felt like her and her sister felt like this was the safest option, you know? As you said, if she stays with her sister, she's too easy to find.
I'm trying to go back and find a question from way early on.
Well, I've got one that's this is from Micah Streeter on YouTube. Micah asks, "Hey, talk about crafting that cathartic ending we just talked about. It was awesome. Was that ending there from the very beginning of your writing process, or was it a creative journey to get there?"
Let's consult the scene.
The first, was that in the, did you know where you wanted to end up in a spot like that before you started writing?
Yes, I'm just looking at, hang on. Okay. So in the original, now remember this, in the original version, she did not kill him. It says here, I can't believe Cecilia tells him they will never be together. She has one of his suits. She's leaving. And then I've got Griffin is enraged. Then he hears a sound. So basically in the original, before I even wrote the first draft, my thought was she was going to say to him, "I could kill you." Like almost like a psychological version of like, you'll never know. I guess in my mind, I was like, just him knowing that he can't be near her is enough of a torture. And then as I was writing the movie and he was doing so much to her, I was like, I got to kill this dude. So this is an example of how the scene cards. But in terms of crafting that end scene, it was a great scene to shoot because they had such a long dialogue scene that we put 2 cameras on them. So we shot both actors at the same time rather than shoot this person and set up over here. So you can get their reactions. And it was almost like a little mini play, you know, with them at opposite ends of this table. And it was really good. I mean, sometimes with throat cutting stuff, there's a tendency for it to look a bit naff on set. You know, you can see the tubes and the blood's not. So sometimes in those moments of physical practical effects, you can doubt yourself. But in the banter between them, I was loving it. I was like, you know, this is really good. For the final shot when she walks out and she closes her eyes, I was playing music. We kept doing take after take, and the sun was coming up. I remember the sun was coming up. We're about to lose the light. And I think I did like 15 takes, and the line producers and everybody on set was like, come on, hurry up. and of course, you know, Elizabeth is, you know, she's incapable of a bad performance. So it wasn't like she was the wrong thing. But I remember saying to her, like, there's a certain feeling that I'm going for. And then I started on the set, and we had, I think it was the title track from the soundtrack to Prisoners, which is a great Johansson soundtrack. And it has that big cathartic feeling to it. If you listen to that title track, I think it's the track from the Prisoners soundtrack called Prisoners. And that's one thing that Elizabeth uses a lot is music. She's always walking around with, in fact, there was a few takes we couldn't use because she forgot to take her little earbuds out. But as soon as it's funny is we kept talking about it. As soon as I played the music, she was like, oh, now I know exactly what you want. And that's when we did that take that you see in the movie was the one, it was like, just as the sun was peeking up over the horizon, the sky was going blue. It's going from black to blue, and we're all about to go home, and everyone's exhausted, and it's freezing cold. That we did the take. I think it was like the second take with music was like the one, and I was like, "That's it,
that's it, we're going."
I was losing,
and not just because the sun's coming up. That was perfect.
It's funny how quickly on a film set the crew, like, I'm running around celebrating, and everyone else is just packing up, wanting to get home. Like cars are leaving around me. Everybody, it's not that they don't care, but it's like, oh, we're done. I'm going home.
Right.
They're not done. They still have to pack up.
Yeah, totally. So I just remember that was really fun to be like, you know, there's that line in the film adaptation. I don't know how well you guys remember that film where there's that line where Brian Cox, who plays Robert McKee in the movie, he's talking to Nicolas Cage's character about screenwriting in movies, and he says, look, man, don't stress too much. Just get the last 10 minutes right, because that's all the audience remembers. Like, it's like this thing in movies. They say that the first 10 pages of a screenplay are the most important, and the last 10 minutes of a movie are the most important thing. And so when you're shooting the final scene of a movie, you really hear that ringing in your head, like, look, I can compromise on things, but not with this. Like, this is the end. The same thing happened on Upgrade. I don't know if you guys remember the last shot of Upgrade where he like pulls the knife out of his hand and he walks towards the camera.
Mm-hmm.
It was exactly the same. We did so many takes on set, and everybody was losing it and saying, we need to get out of here. We've done 20 takes, 25 takes, you know, if we're not going to, and I was just saying, absolutely not. We need to keep shooting until we get it exactly right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Leigh, thanks again for being here. It's congratulations. It's a really great movie.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Everybody watching, if you didn't catch all of this whole video will live on as VOD, so you can rent the movie and watch it along with us again.
Lee's like, we were live the whole time. I thought we were having a watch party. I thought we were watching.
No, yeah, I was like, I did. You do start to get into the zone where it's like it's just us.
Yeah.
We should have been cracking beers at a certain point.
Yeah, I do want to ask you though, because this was such a cool movie, and I was a big fan of Upgrade as well. About what's coming up next is, one of our viewers, Keegan Kimlinus on YouTube, has also asked, is there anything happening with the Escape from New York project?
So
that you can tell us about.
To answer your question, I don't actually know what's up next. A lot of the time, I would, finish something and then I would already have started something else, or there'd be something in the works. But this is a first for me in terms of like nothing on the horizon, nothing planned. So I'm trying to think it. Of course, we're living in this weird Mad Max world right now of, coronavirus lockdown. So it's good thinking time to be like, okay, what do I want to do? So I don't know. Escape from New York, I'm not sure about. That was something that I sort of started getting involved in, and then somebody put out a press release.
Right. And we were all
You're
like,
committed.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. It's funny when that happens because the press release gets ahead of the reality. So you're like,
right.
as soon as it gets sort of shared amongst various websites, it's written in stone, and so I was kind of like, oh well, that train shouldn't have left the station yet. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but I don't know. I'm really trying to think of something. I really love original films that really take chances. We seem to have gotten into this weird space with movies where IP is the king, and
Right.
what superhero is it based on? What's it a remake of? And I'm not against remakes. Some of my favorite movies are remakes, like The Thing, The Fly. There's so many movies. I thought the Dawn of the Dead remake was really fantastic. Like I'm not against remakes in any way, but what really gets me out of bed in the morning is like films like The Matrix, like for a big blockbuster movie, that's a pretty weird film. For a
Very
blockbuster, it's pretty idiosyncratic. It has its own little world, and it's not based on anything. It's not based on a graphic novel or another movie. It's just this thing, and I'm really in awe of that. And I don't know if that time has passed. I would put the question to you guys: do you guys think the time of the original blockbuster, a la The Matrix, or has passed? E.T. If E.T. was made today, is it a Netflix movie? Like, what do you think?
That's what I was going to say. I think it's interesting. Went from this point where original films and like these mid-budget films felt like they were being filtering away because you either had the very small budget movies that people were willing to take a shot on and put in theaters, or everything had to be a really massive budget to make an even larger amount of money, right? And there was like no middle ground. And then suddenly we saw there being a platform of that kind of middle ground distribution through all these streaming services. And now, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, but with what's happening right now and the way that everyone is stuck at home and consuming things on digital because we can't go to theaters, it's like, how will that change things?
Right.
I think that there's going to be a big opportunity for original movies, but I do wonder if like the audience is going to be so trained to wanting to watch things at home that they will end up living on streaming platforms and getting these special distributions in theaters to kind of like be a companion of that. But I think there have been some exceptions to there being really exceptional movies released on exclusive to streaming services, but I think largely we've seen okay to like absolutely terrible movies released there, and I think there needs to be a certain shift where we get like really, really great original movies being put out there that are filling a void.
I mean, obviously last year was actually a Parasite and Knives Out. There were some original movies that really made an impact in theaters, a genuine impact, and so that was a really hopeful. That was great to see that and be like, okay, so there's still an appetite.
Yeah, and conversely, you had like The Irishman on Netflix, which was this 3.5 hour opus from like a prestigious director, one of the best of all time, and just dropped it on a streaming service one day. So,
and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood too.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think a large part of it for me, I don't know about you guys, but there's a large part of it is nostalgia. There's a nostalgic connection for me growing up in an era when original Hollywood movies were more than like Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, RoboCop. That's the era that I have a nostalgic connection to, and I love Hollywood movies. You know, like I love mainstream Hollywood movies that do some, you know, and so I think I think a large part of it is nostalgia and trying to reach back towards that time when those movies that I mentioned were coming out on kind of a weekly basis.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no, it's a great era. I think it's like when I was watching when I first saw your movie, at no point was my brain like you were watching a remake, because I feel like that you did such a great job of imagining a concept and reinterpreting it in a way that was completely unexpected for me, that it never really, I was on my toes the entire time. And I think that that's a really smart way to sort of take something that maybe like with a title will bring us in as comforting. I think for like, you know, for the average person being like, oh yeah, I have a vague idea. Like I told my father we're going to do this tonight. And he's like, I remember seeing that movie. And I was like, well, this one's totally different.
Different movie.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's what I love. It's like there's that sort of like
he's talking about the original movie.
yeah, the original, which he probably saw in theaters, right? No disrespect.
Yeah. He's like, me and Miggsy were playing stickball. We had to eat ramen. And we stole away.
Brian's dad, of course, is
Invincible Man
from the East Coast. So actually, that's pretty spot.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you wouldn't believe it. The Danes were amazing back then.
So that's what I really like, that of like sort of welcoming people in with something that they maybe think they have an understanding of, and then completely catching them off guard. And I think that's something that this movie really triumphs with.
I guess. Oh well, you know, thank you for saying, you know, that about the movie. I mean, maybe that's part of going forward with movies, is you have to have some connection to something that you can then reinvent. But
yeah,
you know, is the era? I hate to get into the whole nostalgia thing, but is the era of the, you know, that blockbuster era of original movies, you know, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, RoboCop, is it over? I'm sure we all know it is, but and anyone pining for its return is going to be disappointed. But as Terry said, maybe it just gets reinvented.
Yeah,
Streaming, where streaming can afford to be original because they don't have that looming overhead of movie theaters.
Right. I would kill to see your take. I would kill to see your take on Gremlins, actually.
right.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, it's funny because I love Gremlins and Big Trouble in Little China, these movies that I grew up loving. But instead of being like, oh, I want to remake that movie, I'm asking myself the impossible, difficult question of, what's today's version of that? How can I come up with the movie that no one's ever heard of that is somehow gonna catch fire? Because these movies could really catch fire back then, you know. Yeah,
and if you ever get a chance to put a Slayer song in any of the movies, all right. I mean, actually, and hopefully he's this user is still watching, but Mindspawn on IG and Discord. This is one of the first questions that showed up.
I know. I was trying to find it. I was like,
there's no easy way to sneak this in there. I think I did it clumsily just now, and that's about the best we can hope for. But we have to know, what is your favorite Slayer song?
Okay. I mean, I'm
think hard, because this is the last question we have for you. So
I'm not going to say Raining Blood, although that was the gateway drug Slayer through one of the first versions of Grand Theft Auto had that song in it, and I was more of a Metallica fan when I was a teenager. I was a late Slayer bloomer.
Sure,
but my favorite Slayer song, I think, is.
No pressure. We're just going to hold you to this forever.
No, I'm blanking on the title. I think it's called. Is it Disciples of Death? Is it? It's.
You have a laptop right in front of you.
I know exactly. Now you guys talk amongst yourselves while I find.
I tell you what. We'll take this time to remind everybody that, again, please go and rent The Invisible Man. It's a wonderful movie that we just watched. And also this watch along will be available on VOD. Let's call it forever.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to watch The Invisible Man, just
I was kind of hoping this was more of a dress rehearsal situation, and we were going to do still one later.
Yeah, this is a good run, guys. You ready to do the real one?
Yeah,
Good
for sure.
rehearsal.
Leigh, can I just say real quick? I've been a gigantic fan of sort of making of books, behind the scenes documentaries, movie commentaries and stuff like that. And while I do appreciate the sort of shift we've made to digital streaming and stuff like that, I feel like a lot of that's been lost. Like IGN specifically used to have an entire channel dedicated to Blu-ray, Blu-ray and DVD reviews, where we talk about this is a great value because it's got all these special features, deleted scenes and stuff like that. So this was like absolutely a treat to get to do this with you today, because I'm such a geek about this kind of stuff, and I feel there's like a new generation that doesn't really get exposed to this much anymore. When you watch a movie on Netflix, you don't really have the opportunity a lot. I've bought like every Star Wars movie digital. Times they'll just put like an hour of like special stuff after the film, and very rarely commentary and everything. So yeah, I mean, just thank you for helping us like sort of bring this back a little bit.
I hope I wouldn't say I was the most disciplined person at doing this, so I apologize. Talking too much and rambling too much.
Well, that's fine. Listen.
I love doing it. I love commentaries like you do, and this movie, when it gets released, you know, when the proper video version gets released, it will have a commentary and behind the scenes. I love a really good behind the scenes documentary. Not many movies still do it. Like a lot of them, as you guys know, will do this sort of 5-minute studio made kind of puff piece where that's the one where the actors are. I mean, I just loved it. It was so fun. But I'm guessing from what you just said that you, like me, are after the Holy Grails, which are the ones where the behind the scenes, it's like an hour or longer, and it really goes in. Like all the David Fincher movies do this really well. They're like warts and all. He even allows them to show him being like peevish and like upset with people on set, which you never get to see that stuff. Like I think there's a great making of documentary attached to the Social Network disc. And in that, I think it's like 2 hours long, but you get to see David Fincher getting pissed off with the crew. I'm like, only Fincher would be like, fine. And,
it's cool to hear about the difficulty.
Yeah, it's amazing to me when I can find that, and I'm always asking recommendations, like saying to people like yourselves, do you know of any good ones? Actually, War of the Worlds has a really great one. It's not a documentary; it's just B-roll, so it's just footage of them making the movie, and they're not like there's no talking heads, there's no commentary. It's just footage of them like standing on set making the movie, and it's really fun. Like. For me to watch, I'm like, so this is how they did that. Yeah. So we
They're
do
like master classes.
We don't quite have the hour-long version, but we have like a director's diary where I'm like talking through the shoot and talking to the camera about how we did certain things, and we have a commentary. We have there's definitely some goodies on this one, and hopefully going forward with other movies, it'll get better. The feature length documentary.
And I'll also say we were talking about, you know, the future for original movies that aren't remakes, you know, sequels, adaptations of that. And I will say of all the genres that I think that they're like thriving and I enjoy them in most is horror, because I think, you know, obviously that there's the Man right now, but as Brian said, this is like a complete reimagining of what that is. But I think that there are so many original horror movies that come out, and like original horror thriller action movies like Upgrade, or I think of like Hereditary and The Witch, and like all these just like really inventive movies. And I think part of the thing with horror is like you have to reinvent the scare a little bit. And if you're doing a remake like you did here, like reapproaching the same property, you have to rethink, how can I scare people in a new way that I haven't scared them before. But I think it's so exciting, and I think horror is, for all that I said, I'm a huge horror baby, and you saw me like looking away when I'm in a completely bright room talking to people and it's minimized on my screen. You know, I think that that's where like I don't know, I get so much enjoyment out of a really interesting, well-made, a unique experience that I haven't had before. And I think ironically that brings people together gush about them, even though horror,
Yeah.
when you consume it by yourself, is probably when you get the most freaked out.
Yeah, I mean, horror is still great, experienced communally, and I think you're right. It's one of the genres left where you can do original stuff, and you don't have to be based on some other piece of IP. And there's actually a lot you can get away with in the horror that makes it a cool genre. Like, it's the only genre where people will just accept a negative ending, like an unhappy ending. You can just kill off the hero, and it. I feel like it's pretty avant-garde within the mainstream sort of genre world. I feel like horror is the genre where you can get away with the most. You can stretch it. You can be a bit artistic. You can definitely push at the form and be more avant-garde than, say, maybe you can with an action movie. You know?
Yeah.
I would say science fiction is in that category
true.
too. With like, I mean, just in the past decade, there's movies like Ex Machina and Under the Skin that kind of rides that that fine line between sci-fi and horror, where you can get away with some banana stuff, and like,
which is it's why I love this movie,
Yeah,
because like you kip hash like two of my favorite genres. You made a sci-fi suit into a horror monster. It's
right.
It
Right.
kicks ass. It's
They
awesome.
actually are really good twin genres. A lot of my favorite horror films are horror sci-fi, like Aliens.
Alien,
yeah.
I love.
Well, listen, there's so many. Let's figure out how to watch Alien for the next. This is just our first episode of Watch from Home Theater, so we really appreciate you being here for it, man. You're
Absolutely. Thanks for
always,
having
of
me.
course, welcome back. We'll get the Terminator back on the show as well.
Bye, Arnie. Goodbye.
Do we get one more? Do we get one more?
Yeah, let's just show us out with your sunglasses and your feet up one more time.
Oh yeah, okay.
And everybody else, thank you so much for watching and sticking with us all the way to the end. It was a real pleasure talking about this movie.
I tell you, there was always that guy in every high school movie, the cool friend of the hero who could flip the sunglasses up.
I know.
Styles. From, I wish I could do that, but I can't. But
I wish I could be Styles.
I wish I could be Styles. Hey, but I want to say thanks for doing this and for letting me blabber on about the movie for the length of the movie, and I appreciate your support of the film, and this was fun. Yeah, let's do it for some other movie that's not one of my films some other time. Like,
your pick. Just whatever you want.
Your choice of Joe Dante films. We'll do.
Okay,
we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out on camera. But everybody else that tuned in, thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Watch from Home Theater.